Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. At the edge of the known universe, where the vast expanse of the cosmos stretches into an endless void, a team of human explorers ventured into the unknown. The sector they had entered was remote, desolate, and far beyond the reach of any human colony. It was a place where the stars seemed fewer, where light itself hesitated to travel. Yet, in this emptiness, they discovered something extraordinary, a structure, ancient and enigmatic, floating silently in the abyss. The structure was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. It was colossal, with smooth, dark surfaces that absorbed light rather than reflected it. The design was alien, almost otherworldly, with intricate patterns and symbols etched into the surface, hinting at a civilization far more advanced than anything Earth had ever seen. The explorers, led by Dr. Emily Hartman, a renowned physicist with a specialty in quantum mechanics, and Colonel Jack Mason, a hardened military strategist, knew they had stumbled upon something monumental. Inside the structure, they found a device, small, unassuming, but radiating an energy that defied understanding. Dr. Hartman was the first to approach it, her scientific curiosity piqued by the readings on her equipment. The device was not just a relic of an ancient civilization, it was something far more powerful. It had the potential to control time itself. Days turned into weeks as Dr. Hartman and her team studied the device, trying to unlock its secrets. The more they learned, the more they realized the device's true potential. It wasn't just a tool for observing time, it could manipulate it. The implications were staggering. Whoever controlled this device would hold the power to alter the course of history, to change the very fabric of reality. It was the ultimate weapon, but their discovery did not go unnoticed. Unbeknownst to them, the activation of the device sent a signal across the universe, a beacon that caught the attention of powerful alien civilizations. These were not benevolent beings, they were ancient, warlike, and driven by a thirst for power. The Vantari, an enigmatic species known for their advanced technology and cryptic motives, saw the device as a means to transcend their physical forms and achieve immortality. The Drakern, a ruthless race of conquerors, viewed it as the ultimate weapon to dominate the galaxy. And the Zenkari, a once great civilization on the brink of extinction, believed the device could save their dying star system. As the alien fleets converged on the edge of the universe, humanity found itself in the crosshairs of an interstellar war. The Earth Federation, the governing body of humanity's interstellar colonies, declared a state of emergency. Panic spread across the colonies as the threat of invasion became imminent. Colonel Mason was tasked with fortifying the defenses, knowing full well that humanity's technology was no match for the advanced weaponry of the alien armadas. The tension within the human ranks was palpable. Soldiers prepared for battle, knowing that the odds were against them. Dr. Hartman, on the other hand, continued her work with a sense of urgency, aware that the key to their survival lay within the device. But time was running out, and the alien fleets were closing in. The first encounter was devastating. The alien ships arrived in waves, their sleek, angular designs cutting through the darkness of space like knives. They unleashed a barrage of energy weapons that tore through the human defenses. The Earth Federation's fleet, despite their best efforts, was overwhelmed. Ships were destroyed, entire battalions were lost, and hope began to fade. Dr. Hartman, monitoring the battle from the command center, knew that conventional warfare was futile. She turned to Colonel Mason, her voice calm but resolute. "We have to use the device," she said, her eyes fixed on the readings. "It's our only chance." Mason hesitated. The idea of weaponizing the device was risky, unprecedented. But as he looked at the destruction unfolding before him, he knew there was no other option. "Do it," he ordered, his voice heavy with the weight of the decision. The process of turning the device into a weapon was complex and fraught with danger. Dr. Hartman and her team worked around the clock, recalibrating the device to manipulate time on a massive scale. The plan was to create a temporal vortex, a tear in the fabric of time that would allow human forces to move through time itself. It was a desperate gamble, but one they had to take. When the device was finally activated, the effect was immediate. The battlefield transformed into a chaotic vortex where past, present, and future collided. Time itself seemed to shatter as human ships disappeared and reappeared, evading enemy fire by slipping through time. Soldiers found themselves fighting alongside their past or future selves, their perceptions of time distorted by the device's power. Colonel Mason led the charge, his ship moving through the folds of time with precision. He coordinated attacks from different points in time, using the temporal advantage to outmaneuver the alien forces. The Vantari, Drakern, and Zenkeri were caught off guard, their superior technology rendered useless in the face of humanity's newfound power. The tide of the battle began to turn, but the use of the device came at a cost. The temporal distortions created by the vortex began to take their toll on the human forces. Soldiers reported strange anomalies, memories that didn't belong to them, injuries that appeared and disappeared, and encounters with versions of themselves from different timelines. The strain on their minds and bodies was immense, and the line between reality and illusion began to blur. Dr. Hartman, witnessing the effects firsthand, realized the dangers of their actions. The device was too powerful, too unpredictable. The longer they used it, the greater the risk of tearing the fabric of time beyond repair. She knew they had to stop, but with the alien forces still pressing their attack, there was no turning back. The alien civilizations, desperate to seize the device, began to devise countermeasures. The Vantari attempted to disrupt the time folds by sending waves of energy pulses designed to destabilize the vortex. The Drakern intensified their assault, using their most advanced weapons to breach the human defenses. And the Zenkeri, realizing their only chance lay in diplomacy, sent emissaries to negotiate a truce, offering to share the device's power in exchange for peace. But Colonel Mason and Dr. Hartman knew that the device could not be allowed to fall into alien hands. The power to control time was too great, too dangerous. It had to be sealed away, forever. As the alien forces closed in, they devised a final, desperate plan. Colonel Mason would lead a suicide mission to plant a temporal disruptor inside the device, triggering a feedback loop that would seal it within a time loop, rendering it inaccessible to anyone. Meanwhile, Dr. Hartman would coordinate a last stand, using the remnants of the human fleet to buy Mason the time he needed. The final battle was fierce, a cacophony of destruction and chaos. Mason's team infiltrated the structure, fighting their way through alien soldiers and automated defenses. The closer they got to the device, the more intense the temporal distortions became. Time itself seemed to rebel, warping and twisting in unpredictable ways. Mason, determined and focused, led his team to the heart of the structure. As they reached the device, the distortions became almost unbearable. Mason's vision blurred, his mind filled with memories of battles that hadn't yet happened, of comrades who were both alive and dead. But he pushed forward, knowing that the fate of the universe rested on their success. With the disruptor in place, Mason initiated the sequence. The device began to glow, its energy building to a crescendo. The temporal feedback loop started to form, pulling the device, and everything around it, into a closed time loop. Mason's team, realizing they would be trapped forever, made their peace with their fate. They had saved humanity, but at the cost of their lives. Outside the structure, Dr. Hartman watched as the alien forces faltered. The Vantari ships flickered and disappeared, the Drakern weapon systems failed, and the Zenkari emissaries fell silent. The time loop was complete, and the device was gone, sealed away, beyond the reach of any civilization. The aftermath of the battle was somber. The human forces, battered and broken, retreated from the edge of the universe. The victory was theirs, but it came at a tremendous cost. Thousands of lives were lost, and the device, now locked in an eternal loop, remained a ghostly presence, a reminder of the dangers of tampering with time. Dr. Hartman, back on Earth, reflected on the events that had unfolded. They had saved the universe, but at what price? The power to control time was too great for any being to wield. It was a power that could never be trusted in the hands of any civilization, no matter how advanced. As she looked out at the stars, she knew that humanity had learned a valuable lesson. They had faced the ultimate challenge and emerged victorious, but they would never forget the sacrifices made along the way. The device, sealed away in the folds of time, was both a victory and a warning, a testament to the thin line between creation and destruction. And so, humanity continued to explore the universe, stronger and more united than ever before. But they did so with a newfound respect for the forces they had encountered. They knew that some powers were not meant to be controlled, that some secrets were best left buried in the depths of time. The ultimate battle was over, but its legacy would endure, a story passed down through generations, a story of courage, sacrifice, and the timeless struggle between power and responsibility. The stars shimmered faintly in the vast, endless void, a stark contrast to the tumultuous events that had just transpired at the edge of the universe. The once chaotic battlefield now lay in eerie silence, the remnants of alien fleets drifting lifelessly through the void, testament to the ferocity of the conflict that had just concluded. Humanity had emerged victorious, but the cost was evident, and the weight of their actions pressed heavily on the survivors. Dr. Emily Hartman stood alone in the observation deck of the Federation's flagship, her gaze distant as she stared into the expanse of space. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the cacophony of battle that still echoed in her mind. The temporal distortions had ceased, the time loop had been sealed, and the device, the object that had sparked this interstellar conflict, was now lost to them, locked away in a never-ending cycle of time. But the victory, as much as it was celebrated across the human colonies, felt hollow to her. The power they had wielded, the devastation they had unleashed, it was too much for any one civilization to control. The risks, the sacrifices, the lives lost, it was a heavy burden to bear. And the device, though sealed away, would forever be a reminder of the thin line they had walked, between survival and annihilation. The door to the observation deck slid open, and Colonel Jack Mason stepped inside, his presence a comforting but somber one. He had led the final assault, had been the one to give the order to activate the disruptor that had sealed the device away. He, too, bore the weight of their actions, but his resolve remained unshaken. Emily, Mason's voice broke the silence, his tone calm yet filled with an unspoken understanding. The Federation Council has convened. They want a full report on the battle and the status of the device. Hartman nodded, tearing her gaze away from the stars. "I'll prepare the data," she replied, her voice carrying a note of exhaustion. "But what do we tell them? The truth? That we've meddled with forces beyond our understanding? That we've tampered with time itself?" Mason's expression hardened slightly. "We tell them what they need to know, that the device is sealed, beyond anyone's reach. That humanity is safe, for now. The details, we'll handle those when the time comes." There was a moment of silence between them, a shared understanding of the magnitude of what they had done. They had played with the fabric of time, had wielded a power that could reshape the universe. But in the end, they had done what was necessary to survive. Hartman took a deep breath, trying to shake off the weariness that clung to her. Jack, do you think we'll ever truly be free of this? The knowledge of what we've done, of what we were capable of. Mason's eyes softened, and he stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. No, he said simply. We'll never forget. But we'll carry on. We have to. For the sake of those who didn't make it, for the future of humanity. The words resonated with Hartman, offering a sliver of comfort. They had fought to protect their people, to ensure that humanity would continue to exist, to explore the stars. But the memories of what they had unleashed, what they had witnessed in the folds of time, would never leave them. The Federation Council was a somber affair. The gathered officials, each representing one of humanity's far-flung colonies, listened intently as Hartman and Mason delivered their report. The details of the battle were laid out, the tactics employed, the desperate final assault on the alien fleets. But when it came to the device, the explanation was brief and carefully worded. The temporal device is no longer a threat, Hartman stated, her voice measured and calm. It has been sealed within a time loop, inaccessible to any civilization. The risk of it being used as a weapon, by us or anyone else, has been eliminated. There were murmurs among the council members, expressions of relief mixed with concern. The device had been a double-edged sword, its power undeniable, but the potential for disaster immense. The fact that it was now out of reach was reassuring, but the knowledge that such a thing had existed at all was unsettling. What of the alien civilizations? One of the counselors asked, his tone sharp. Will they return? Will they seek revenge for their defeat? Mason answered, his voice steady and authoritative. The Vantari, Drakern, and Zenkeri have suffered significant losses. Their fleets are in disarray, and without the device to pursue, they lack the motivation to continue their assault. For now, humanity is safe. The counselors seemed to accept this, though the tension in the room remained palpable. The threat had been averted, but the scars of the battle, both physical and psychological, would take time to heal. As the council meeting concluded, Hartman and Mason were left alone once more, the weight of their responsibilities settling heavily upon them. They had done their duty, had protected their people, but the future remained uncertain. Emily, Mason said quietly as they left the council chamber, we need to focus on rebuilding. On making sure something like this never happens again. Hartman nodded, though her thoughts were still tangled with the events of the past days. Yes, she agreed, but we also need to remember. To ensure that the knowledge of what we've done, what we've discovered, isn't lost. It's too important, too dangerous to ignore. Mason agreed, though his expression remained grim. We'll document everything, secure it where it can't be easily accessed. But we have to be careful. This kind of power, it's not something that should be tampered with lightly. They walked in silence for a time, the gravity of their conversation hanging in the air. The battle had been won, but the cost was high, and the implications of their actions were still unraveling. Back aboard the Federation's flagship, Hartman returned to her lab, the place where she had first studied the device, where she had first glimpsed the potential to control time. The lab was quiet now, the equipment powered down, the data files carefully archived. But the memories of those frantic, desperate hours lingered, a reminder of the razor's edge they had walked. She sat down at her workstation, pulling up the files she had been compiling, notes on the device, the theories she had developed, the calculations that had led to its weaponization. It was all there, neatly organized, a record of humanity's brush with the impossible. As she reviewed the data, she couldn't help but think about the what-ifs. What if they had never found the device? What if the aliens had reached it first? What if they had lost the battle? The possibilities were endless, each one more terrifying than the last, but they hadn't lost. They had survived, and they had done so by using the very thing that had threatened to destroy them. It was a paradox, one that she would grapple with for the rest of her life. The door to the lab slid open, and Mason stepped inside, his presence a grounding force in the midst of her turbulent thoughts. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice gentle. Hartman looked up, meeting his gaze. "I'm processing," she admitted. "It's going to take time." Mason nodded, understanding in his eyes. "We all are. But we'll get through this. Together." The words were simple, but they carried a weight of truth. They had faced the unthinkable and come out the other side. The scars would remain, but they would heal. And as long as they had each other, they would find a way to move forward. As they stood there, in the quiet of the lab, the enormity of what they had accomplished began to sink in. They had protected their people, had ensured the survival of humanity in the face of an existential threat. It was a victory, though not one without its costs. Hartman took a deep breath, feeling a sense of resolve settle over her. They had a long road ahead of them, but they would walk it together. And they would ensure that the lessons they had learned were not forgotten. As the days turned into weeks, the process of rebuilding began. The human colonies, though shaken by the events, rallied together in a show of unity and strength. The remnants of the alien fleets were scattered across the cosmos, no longer a direct threat, but their presence was a reminder of the dangers that still lurked in the universe. Hartman and Mason continued their work, overseeing the recovery efforts, ensuring that the knowledge of the device was secured and hidden away. They knew that the future was uncertain, that the universe was vast and filled with unknowns. But they also knew that humanity had faced its greatest challenge and had emerged stronger for it, and as they looked to the stars, they carried with them the memory of the ultimate battle, a battle that had tested their limits, had pushed them to the brink, but had ultimately shown them the strength of the human spirit. The end of the story was not a conclusion, but a beginning, a new chapter in the ongoing saga of humanity's journey through the stars. They would continue to explore, to discover, to grow. But they would do so with a newfound respect for the forces that shaped the universe, and a solemn understanding of the responsibilities that came with wielding such power. And as they ventured into the unknown, they carried with them the lessons of the past, the bonds forged in the fires of battle, and the knowledge that, no matter the odds, humanity would endure. Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The Shadow Legion moved with the silence of shadows, their presence undetectable to all but the most sophisticated sensors. Their mission, buried deep within the layers of galactic secrecy, was known only to a handful of high-ranking officials on Earth. Commander Alex Steele, a man whose calm demeanor belied the fierce determination within, led the team. His steely blue eyes scanned the holographic display before him, absorbing every detail of Zenith 9, a planet now under the control of the Crimson Reavers. "Zenith 9 is key," General Harper had said during the briefing, his voice gravelly from years of command. "The Crimson Reavers have turned it into a fortress, and their next move could ignite a war that would engulf the entire sector." Steele had listened in silence, absorbing the weight of the task. Now, aboard their stealth ship, he replayed the mission details in his mind as the ship slipped through the void of space, cloaked from any prying eyes. His team was the best humanity had to offer: Sergeant Maya Quinn, the brilliant tactician; Lieutenant Jake Hunter, a demolitions expert with a flair for improvisation; and Corporal Ivan Petrov, a sniper whose precision was matched only by his silence. The planet loomed ahead, a barren wasteland scarred by ancient battles and harsh weather. Zenith 9's atmosphere was barely breathable, filled with dust and debris from centuries of conflict. The Crimson Reavers had chosen their stronghold well, burrowing deep into the planet's surface where natural defenses and advanced technology shielded them from detection. "Prepare for landing," Steele ordered, his voice a low rumble that cut through the hum of the ship's engines. The team moved with practiced efficiency, donning their adaptive camouflage suits, state-of-the-art gear that allowed them to blend seamlessly into their surroundings. The suits were equipped with energy dampeners, making them nearly invisible to infrared and radar detection. Each member checked their weapons, compact but lethal, designed for close-quarters combat and long-range precision alike. The ship descended into Zenith 9's atmosphere, its stealth systems engaged to mask the entry. The landing was smooth, the craft settling into a concealed ravine miles from the Crimson Reaver's stronghold. The landscape was bleak, a wasteland of jagged rocks and swirling dust storms that obscured the horizon. "Move out," Steele commanded, and the team slipped into the shadows, their forms blending with the environment as they began the trek toward the enemy's base. The first sign of trouble came earlier than expected. Crimson Reaver scouts, more heavily armed than anticipated, patrolled the area. Their armor was a patchwork of alien technology, crude but effective, and their weapons glowed with a dangerous, unstable energy. "Hold," Steele whispered, raising a hand. The team froze, blending perfectly with the rocks around them. The scouts passed within feet of their position, unaware of the deadly force lying in wait. Steele waited until they were out of sight before giving the signal to proceed. The entrance to the enemy's stronghold was heavily fortified, just as their intelligence had predicted. Automated turrets and energy shields formed a nearly impenetrable barrier. A direct assault was suicide, even for a team as skilled as the Shadow Legion. "We go underground," Steele said, pointing to a barely visible crevice in the rock face. The entrance to an ancient tunnel system, long forgotten by the planet's inhabitants but recently rediscovered by the Legion's intelligence operatives. It was their way in, but it would be far from easy. The tunnels were dark, the air thick with dust and the faint smell of decay. The walls, once smooth and polished, were now cracked and worn by time. The team moved cautiously, every step measured to avoid triggering the traps that had been laid by the Reavers, or the ones left behind by the original builders. Quinn was at the front, her tactical visor scanning for threats. "Tripwire, 2 o'clock, she whispered, pointing out a nearly invisible line stretched across the path. Hunter moved forward, carefully disarming the trap with a few deft movements. "They've booby-trapped the whole place," he muttered. "Gotta love these guys." The team pressed on, navigating the maze of tunnels with precision. Occasionally, they encountered remnants of the ancient inhabitants, cryptic carvings on the walls, long-abandoned machinery, and even the skeletal remains of creatures long extinct. But the true challenge came when they reached the heart of the fortress. The enemy had not been idle. The tunnels were swarming with Crimson Reaver soldiers, and the team had to rely on every ounce of their training to remain undetected. Petrov took point, his sniper rifle fitted with a suppressor as he picked off guards one by one from the shadows. His shots were precise, each one dropping a target silently before they could raise the alarm. But as they moved deeper, the resistance grew fiercer. The Reavers were well armed and well prepared, their ranks filled with battle-hardened warriors who had faced countless enemies. The Shadow Legion found themselves in the middle of a war zone, outnumbered and outgunned, yet they fought with the determination of those who knew the fate of the galaxy rested on their shoulders. The climax of their infiltration came as they breached the inner sanctum of the fortress, a massive control room filled with alien technology, where the Reaver leaders were orchestrating their war plans. The room was a hive of activity, with holographic displays showing battle formations, troop movements, and the countdown to the launch of a devastating weapon aimed at neighboring star systems, Steele signaled for the team to spread out. Quinn moved to the control panels, her fingers dancing over the alien interface as she hacked into the system, planting viruses that would cripple the Reavers' communications. Hunter set his charges, each one carefully placed to cause maximum destruction when the time came, but they were discovered before they could complete their mission. An alarm blared, and the room erupted into chaos. The Reavers, realizing they were under attack, launched a desperate counteroffensive. Steele and his team were caught in a brutal firefight, forced to fight their way to the central command console where the Reaver leader, a hulking alien with a twisted face and cruel eyes, stood directing his troops. The final battle was fierce. Steele engaged the leader in a one-on-one duel, their blades clashing in a deadly dance. The alien was strong, but Steele was faster, his years of training and battlefield experience giving him the edge. Around him, his team fought with the same ferocity, their weapons cutting through the enemy ranks as they raced against time to stop the launch sequence. Hunter's charges detonated, rocking the fortress with a series of explosions that sent debris raining down. Quinn succeeded in shutting down the weapon's launch systems, her hands moving faster than thought as she bypassed security protocols and disabled the targeting arrays. In the end, it was Steele who delivered the killing blow, his blade piercing the Reaver leader's chest and ending the battle. The alien slumped to the ground, his final breath a gurgling rasp as he realized his defeat, but there was no time to celebrate. The fortress, now crippled by the team's sabotage, began to collapse around them. Steele ordered the retreat, and the team fought their way back through the tunnels, emerging into the harsh light of Zenith 9's surface. Just as the fortress imploded behind them, the Shadow Legion made it to their extraction point, where their stealth ship awaited. They boarded in silence, each member reflecting on the mission's cost, the lives lost, the danger faced, and the knowledge that their victory, though significant, was only a temporary reprieve in a galaxy teetering on the brink of war. As the ship lifted off, Steele looked out at the planet below, now a ruined shell of its former self. "We did what we came to do," he said quietly, more to himself than to his team. "But the fight isn't over." Back on Earth, the debriefing was brief. The team's success had averted a major war, but the revelations uncovered during the mission sent shockwaves through the highest echelons of power. The involvement of shadowy alien entities behind the rebellion pointed to a much larger conspiracy, one that threatened the delicate balance of power in the galaxy. The Shadow Legion was commended for their bravery, their mission hailed as a triumph. But the accolades meant little to Steele and his team. They had seen the darkness lurking behind the rebellion, and they knew that the galaxy was far from safe. As they prepared for their next mission, each member of the Shadow Legion carried with them the weight of their experiences on Zenith 9. They had won the battle, but the war, the true war, was only beginning. And they would be there, in the shadows, ready to fight for the future of humanity, no matter the cost. The story ends with the Shadow Legion being called to another mission, their fates tied to the ongoing struggle for peace in a galaxy where danger and intrigue lurk around every corner. The Shadow Legion's return to Earth was met with little fanfare, as was the norm for their secretive operations. The debriefing was conducted in a sterile, windowless room deep within the heart of a military facility known only as the Hub. General Harper, who had initially briefed them, was present, his stern face betraying nothing of the immense pressure that now weighed on his shoulders. "Good work," Harper said, his tone flat as he reviewed the holographic reports. "Zenith 9 is secure, and the Crimson Reavers are no longer a threat. But what you've uncovered..." He trailed off, his eyes narrowing as he regarded Steele and his team. "This changes everything." Steele remained silent, his expression as unreadable as ever. The mission had been a success by all measurable standards, but the implications of the conspiracy they had stumbled upon were far-reaching. The shadowy alien entities pulling the strings behind the rebellion were an unknown factor, one that could destabilize the galaxy if not dealt with swiftly and decisively. "Your next mission will be even more delicate," Harper continued, his voice dropping to a low rumble. "We need to know who these entities are, what they want, and how deep their influence runs. You'll be going undercover, infiltrating the very heart of their operations." Quinn, always the strategist, leaned forward slightly. "Do we have any leads on where to start, sir?" Harper nodded, activating another holographic display. This one showed a star system on the edge of known space, a place where human and alien territories blurred into one another. "This is the Cora Vortex, a region notorious for its lawlessness. Smugglers, pirates, and worse operate freely there, and it's where we believe these entities have set up a base of operations. Your mission is to gather intelligence, identify their leadership, and, if possible, neutralize the threat." Steele glanced at his team, each member returning his gaze with a nod of understanding. The Cora Vortex was a place few returned from, but it was also where they were needed most. The galaxy's peace, fragile as it was, depended on their success, the briefing concluded with little else said. The Shadow Legion knew their roles, their responsibilities. There was no need for further discussion. They were professionals, each one honed by years of combat and clandestine operations. This was just another mission, albeit one with stakes higher than any they had faced before. Their ship, repaired and restocked, was ready within hours. The team boarded in silence, each member mentally preparing for the challenges ahead. As the ship ascended through Earth's atmosphere, Steele took one last look at the planet below, the blue and green orb that was home to billions of lives they had sworn to protect. He knew they might not return from this mission, but that was a reality they all accepted long ago. The journey to the Cora Vortex was uneventful, the crew settling into a routine of training, equipment checks, and quiet contemplation. The ship was equipped with the latest in stealth technology, ensuring that they would arrive undetected. But even the best technology couldn't guarantee safety in a place like the Vortex. As they approached their destination, the mood aboard the ship grew tenser. The Vortex was a region of space unlike any other, where gravitational anomalies and spatial distortions made navigation treacherous. It was a natural barrier, one that had deterred many would-be conquerors throughout history. But it was also the perfect hiding place for those who wished to operate in the shadows. "Entering the Vortex in 3 minutes," Quinn announced from the cockpit, her hands steady on the controls. "All systems green. We're cloaked and running silent." Steele nodded, his eyes on the forward viewport where the swirling maelstrom of the Vortex loomed. It was a sight few had seen and lived to describe. The Vortex was a massive nebula, its core a churning mix of gas, dust, and debris, illuminated by the light of distant stars. It was beautiful in a way, a stark contrast to the danger it represented. "Hold course," Steele said, his voice calm. "We're looking for an opening." The ship's sensors probed the Vortex, mapping out the safest route through the chaotic region. It was like threading a needle, each movement precise, every calculation critical. A single mistake could send them spiraling into the heart of the nebula, where even their advanced technology wouldn't be enough to save them. "Got it," Quinn said, a hint of relief in her voice as a safe passage revealed itself on the screen. "We're through." The ship slipped into the Vortex, its shield straining against the intense gravitational forces. The crew held their breath as the ship was buffeted by turbulent waves of energy, but Quinn's expert piloting kept them on course. Minutes passed like hours, the tension thick in the air, until finally, the ship broke through into the calm beyond. "Clear," Quinn announced, exhaling the breath she'd been holding. "We're in." The Cora vortex was behind them now, and before them lay the uncharted territory where their enemies hid. The ship's sensors lit up with readings of nearby vessels, most of them small, fast, and heavily armed. Pirates, no doubt, scanning for easy prey. But the Shadow Legion's ship, cloaked and silent, slipped past unnoticed. Their destination was a large asteroid field, dense and sprawling, where intelligence indicated a hidden base lay. The base was rumored to be heavily fortified, protected by automated defense systems and manned by a coalition of alien mercenaries. It was here, within the heart of the asteroid field, that Steele and his team would find the answers they sought. As they neared the outer edge of the field, Steele gathered his team for a final briefing. The mission parameters were clear: infiltrate the base, gather intel on the alien entities, and if possible, neutralize the threat. But this time, they had to do it without being detected, as the enemy was far more powerful than anything they had faced before. "We go in quiet," Steele said, his voice low but firm. "No one knows we're here. We get what we need, and we get out." The team nodded, their expressions serious. Each knew the risks, but they also knew the importance of their mission. They suited up in their adaptive camouflage gear, checked their weapons, and prepared for the drop. The ship's docking bay opened, revealing the blackness of space beyond. One by one, they slipped out of the ship, using thrusters to navigate through the asteroid field. The massive rocks tumbled through space, creating a deadly obstacle course that would have been impossible for lesser soldiers to navigate. But the Shadow Legion moved with practiced precision, avoiding detection as they closed in on the base. The base itself was a sprawling complex built into the side of a massive asteroid, with hangars large enough to house dozens of ships and an energy shield that shimmered faintly in the starlight. It was a fortress, designed to repel any conventional assault, but Steele and his team were anything but conventional. Quinn was the first to reach the base, her visor displaying the security systems that guarded the perimeter. "Looks like standard automated defenses, plus a few surprises," she muttered, more to herself than the team. "But nothing we can't handle." She moved to a small access panel hidden behind a cluster of rocks, her fingers deftly working to bypass the security protocols. The rest of the team held position, weapons ready in case of an ambush. Seconds ticked by, each one stretching into eternity, until finally, Quinn nodded. "We're in." They slipped through a maintenance hatch, entering the base's lower levels. The corridors were dimly lit, the air heavy with the smell of machine oil and metal. The base was quiet, but the tension was palpable. They were in enemy territory now, and one wrong move could mean disaster. The team moved silently through the corridors, their every step measured, their senses heightened. They had trained for years for moments like this, where precision and discipline were the difference between life and death. They passed through a series of checkpoints, each one more secure than the last, until they reached the heart of the base, the command center. The command center was a large, circular room filled with alien technology. Holographic displays covered the walls, showing various star systems, including Earth's. At the center of the room was a large, circular console, manned by a group of alien officers. These were not the ragtag rebels of Zenith 9, these were trained professionals, their eyes scanning the displays with cold efficiency. Steele signaled the team to hold position. They couldn't risk a direct confrontation, not here. Instead, they would gather the intelligence they needed and leave without being detected. Quinn moved to the console, her fingers dancing over the controls as she began downloading the data. The rest of the team stood guard, their eyes scanning the room for any sign of trouble. the download took only minutes, but it felt like hours. Steele's mind raced as he considered the possibilities. If they could gather enough information here, they could expose the alien entities behind the rebellion, potentially preventing a galaxy-wide conflict. But if they were caught, the mission, and possibly their lives, would be forfeit. Finally, the download was complete. Quinn gave Steele a nod, and the team began to move back toward the maintenance hatch. But just as they reached the corridor, a loud alarm blared through the base. "They know we're here," Hunter said, his voice tense. "We've got to move, now." The team broke into a run, their training kicking in as they sprinted through the base. The corridors were now filled with enemy soldiers, all converging on their position. The Shadow Legion fought with the precision of a well-oiled machine, their weapons cutting down any who stood in their way, but the sheer numbers against them were overwhelming. Steele led the charge, his blade flashing as he cleared a path through the enemies. The team moved as one, their movements synchronized and deadly, but the base was on full alert now, and the odds were growing worse by the second. As they reached the maintenance hatch, Steele realized they were out of time. The base's defenses were closing in, and there was no way they could all make it back to the ship. He made a split-second decision, one that only a commander could make. "Go!" Steele ordered, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Get back to the ship." "That's an order." Quinn hesitated, her eyes meeting Steele's, but she knew better than to argue. The mission came first. She and the rest of the team slipped through the hatch, their forms disappearing into the darkness beyond. Steele turned to face the oncoming wave of enemies, his grip tightening on his weapon. He had no intention of dying here, but he also knew that the mission depended on him buying the team enough time to escape. He would make sure they succeeded, even if it cost him his life. The first wave of soldiers rushed forward, their weapons blazing. Steele moved with deadly precision, his blade cutting through armor and flesh alike. He fought with the fury of a man who knew that his death would mean nothing if the mission failed. The corridor was filled with the sounds of battle, the clang of metal on metal, the shouts of the dying, but even Steele couldn't hold out forever. The enemy was relentless, their numbers too great. As the last of his strength began to wane, Steele saw the faces of his team in his mind: Quinn, Hunter, Petrov. He knew they would carry on the fight, that they would succeed where he could not. In his final moments, Steele felt a strange sense of peace. He had done his duty, fought with honor, and given everything he had for the cause. As the darkness closed in, he allowed himself one last thought: that the Shadow Legion would continue, that they would carry the torch of hope and peace in a galaxy teetering on the brink of chaos. And with that, Alex Steele, commander of the Shadow Legion, fell silent. The team made it back to the ship, Quinn's hands shaking as she initiated the launch sequence. The base exploded behind them, a fiery testament to Steele's sacrifice. The data they had gathered would change the course of the war, but the cost had been high. As the ship soared through the void of space, Quinn and the rest of the team remained silent. There were no words that could capture the loss they felt, the hole that Steele's absence left in their hearts. But they knew, as he had known, that the mission was bigger than any one of them. They had to keep fighting, had to honor Steele's memory by seeing this through to the end. The ship slipped into hyperspace, carrying the Shadow Legion and their precious cargo of information toward their next mission. The fight was far from over, but they would face it with the same determination and courage that had brought them this far. They were the Shadow Legion, the galaxy's last line of defense, and they would not falter, no matter the cost. Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. In the distant future, humanity had established itself as a dominant force in the Milky Way, spreading its influence across countless star systems. The Galactic Empire, as it was known, was a vast and powerful entity, stretching from the core worlds to the outermost colonies. It was a time of technological marvels and unimaginable wealth, but also a period fraught with tension, both from external alien threats and internal factions vying for control. Elias Kane was an ordinary man, or so it seemed. In his late 30s, he was a mid-level engineer stationed on Arcturus IV, a crucial hub for the Empire's communication and transportation networks. He was known for his diligence, precision, and an uncanny ability to solve complex problems, but beyond his work, he was largely invisible, a quiet figure who preferred the solitude of his quarters to the bustling social life of the station. Elias's work was essential, though often overlooked by those in power. He maintained the warp gate systems, the lifelines of the Empire that allowed for instantaneous travel across the vast distances of space. Without these gates, the Empire would fracture, its far-flung colonies and military outposts isolated and vulnerable. Yet, despite the importance of his work, Elias had no ambitions beyond his station, no desire for recognition or advancement. He was content in his anonymity, believing that his small contributions were enough, but all of that would change on a day that began like any other. As Elias conducted a routine system check, his sharp eyes caught something unusual, a minor anomaly in the data streams of the warp gates. At first, he thought it was a simple glitch, perhaps a result of solar interference or a minor malfunction. But as he dug deeper, his curiosity piqued. He found something far more disturbing. The anomaly wasn't random, it was deliberate. Elias's heart raced as he uncovered encrypted communications buried deep within the system. The messages were brief, coded, and exchanged between high-ranking officials within the Empire. They spoke of an impending event, a plan that could destabilize the entire galactic empire. The words were vague, but the implications were clear. A conspiracy was brewing, one that threatened the very foundation of the Empire. For a moment, Elias hesitated. He was just an engineer, a man who had spent his life in the shadows, content to let others shape the fate of the galaxy. Reporting this could bring unwanted attention, could make him a target. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized the gravity of the situation. If this conspiracy was real, if it succeeded, countless lives would be at risk. The Empire could fall into chaos, torn apart by internal strife. Elias knew he couldn't ignore it. But he also knew that simply reporting his findings might not be enough. He needed to understand the full extent of the plot, to gather more evidence before he could act. And so, with a resolve that surprised even him, Elias began his investigation. He worked in secret, accessing the systems late at night when the station was quiet, and the only sounds were the hum of machinery and the distant thrumming of the warp gates. His skills as an engineer allowed him to navigate the complex data networks, tracing the encrypted communications to their sources. The more he uncovered, the more dangerous the conspiracy seemed. The messages led him to various key locations across the Empire, military outposts, government facilities, even private corporations. The conspiracy was vast, involving powerful figures who were dissatisfied with the current leadership. They were planning a coup, a simultaneous strike on loyalist strongholds using the warp gates to coordinate their forces. If they succeeded, the Empire would be theirs. As Elias delved deeper, the danger grew. He encountered security systems designed to keep out even the most skilled hackers, loyalists who would do anything to protect the conspiracy, and mercenaries hired to silence anyone who got too close. There were close calls, moments when Elias thought he had been discovered, when he had to erase his tracks and disappear into the shadows. But he pressed on, driven by a newfound sense of purpose. He couldn't let the Empire fall, not if there was something he could do to stop it. One night, after weeks of careful investigation, Elias finally discovered the heart of the conspiracy. The encrypted communications had led him to a remote moon, an industrial wasteland where the conspirators had gathered for a covert meeting. Disguised as a maintenance worker and using his technical expertise, Elias infiltrated the facility, his heart pounding with every step. Inside, he found them, high-ranking military officers, corporate executives, and politicians, all gathered around a holographic display. They spoke in hushed tones, discussing their plans with a cold, calculating precision. Elias recorded everything, gathering the evidence he needed to expose them. But just as he was about to leave, disaster struck. One of the conspirators noticed something amiss, a door left slightly ajar, a tool out of place. Suspicion flared, and within moments, Elias found himself discovered. Panic surged through him, but years of working in dangerous environments had honed his instincts. He bolted, darting through the industrial complex as alarms blared and armed guards gave chase. The chase was intense, a deadly game of cat and mouse through the twisting corridors and massive machinery of the facility. Elias used every trick he knew, rerouting power, locking doors behind him, and using the facility's layout to his advantage. But his pursuers were relentless, and he could feel the net closing in. Finally, battered and bleeding, Elias reached the edge of the complex. With no other options, he activated a maintenance shuttle and blasted off, the facility's defenses firing after him. The shuttle was a rickety old thing, not meant for combat, but it was fast enough to get him out of range before the conspirators could stop him. Safe, for now, Elias set course for the nearest Imperial fleet outpost. He had the evidence, but he knew he couldn't trust anyone. The conspiracy reached into the highest levels of the Empire, and any misstep could mean his death. But he had no choice. He had to act, and quickly. When he arrived at the outpost, Elias contacted an old friend, someone he knew he could trust, Captain Arya Voss, a high-ranking officer in the Imperial fleet. Years ago, they had worked together on a project to upgrade the fleet's communication systems, and he knew she was as loyal to the Empire as he was. Using a secure channel, Elias told Arya everything. He showed her the evidence, the recordings, the data he had gathered. At first, she was skeptical. It all seemed too far-fetched, too unbelievable. But as Elias laid out the details, she began to understand the gravity of the situation. The Empire was on the brink of a civil war, and only they could stop it. Arya acted quickly. She contacted a small group of trusted officers, and together they devised a plan to counter the coup. The conspirators were already moving their forces into position, using the warp gates to coordinate their attack. But Elias knew the system better than anyone. He had designed many of the security protocols himself, and he knew how to disrupt them. The plan was simple but dangerous. Elias would take control of the central warp gate hub on Arcturus IV, the most important node in the entire network. From there, he could reroute the gates, sending the rebel forces to isolated sectors where they could be picked off by loyalist fleets. It was a risky move. If he was caught, the conspirators would win. But it was the only chance they had. With Arya's help, Elias returned to Arcturus IV. The station was quiet when he arrived, the night shift workers unaware of the storm about to break. Elias made his way to the control center, his heart pounding with anticipation. He knew every inch of this station, every system and circuit, and he used that knowledge to his advantage. As he accessed the central computer, Elias felt a strange sense of calm. He was in his element, surrounded by the familiar hum of machinery, the flicker of holographic displays. He had spent years working in the shadows, unnoticed, unappreciated. But now, in this moment, he realized that everything had led to this. With swift, precise movements, Elias began rerouting the warp gates. He sent false signals, tricking the rebel fleets into thinking they were jumping to key targets when, in fact, they were being scattered across the galaxy. Loyalist forces, tipped off by Arya, were waiting for them at every turn, but the conspirators weren't fools. As they realized what was happening, they struck back, launching a cyber attack on the station's systems. The control center was suddenly a battlefield, alarms blaring, screens flashing with warnings as the rebels tried to wrest control from Elias. It was a duel in the digital realm, a clash of minds and machines. Elias fought with everything he had, his fingers flying over the controls, his mind racing to stay ahead of the attackers. He rerouted power, shut down systems, and opened backdoors he had built years ago, never thinking he'd need them. The tension was unbearable, but Elias refused to give in. He was no soldier, no hero, but he had something the conspirators didn't, a deep, intimate knowledge of the system, and a determination to protect the Empire at all costs. Sweat dripped down his face as he fought to maintain control, his vision blurring from exhaustion. Just when it seemed like the rebels might overwhelm him, a message flashed on his screen, a signal from Arya. The Loyalist fleets had engaged the enemy, and the battle was turning in their favor. The conspirators were being crushed, their fleets isolated and vulnerable, unable to regroup. Elias felt a surge of relief, but he knew it wasn't over yet. He had to lock down the warp gates, seal the network to prevent any last-ditch escape attempts. With a final burst of energy, he activated the lockdown protocol, severing the gates from the control of the rebels. The screen went dark for a moment, then lit up with a single message: network secure. Elias collapsed back in his chair, his body trembling with fatigue. He had done it. The coup had been stopped, the Empire saved from destruction. But there would be no celebration, no medals or accolades. The victory had been won in the shadows, by a man who would remain nameless, his deeds unknown. In the aftermath, the Empire was shaken but stood firm. The conspirators were rounded up, their plans exposed, and their influence purged from the military. Arya and her loyalists ensured that justice was served, though they never revealed the full extent of Elias's role in the victory. It was better that way, they agreed. The Empire needed stability, not heroes. As for Elias, he returned to his life as an engineer on Arcturus IV. The days that followed were quiet, almost surreal after the chaos of the coup. He resumed his work, maintaining the warp gates, ensuring that the lifelines of the Empire remained strong. But something had changed in him. He no longer felt invisible, no longer a mere cog in the machine. He had seen the darkness within the Empire, had fought it, and won. And though he would never be recognized for his deeds, he knew that he had made a difference. That knowledge was enough. One evening, as Elias sat alone in his quarters, he received a message, a simple text from Arya, thanking him for his help. It was brief, no more than a few words, but it meant the world to him. He smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. Elias Kane, the nameless hero of the Galactic Empire, returned to his work, content in the knowledge that he had done his part. The galaxy was safe, at least for now, and he would continue to protect it in his own quiet way, from the shadows. And so, the story of the nameless hero comes to an end, not with a grand parade or a public celebration, but with the quiet satisfaction of a job well done, the Empire secure for another day. Elias Kane returned to his usual routine on Arcturus IV, but everything felt different now. The quiet hum of the station, the rhythmic pulse of the warp gates, even the mundane reports he filed each day, these were all the same, yet they seemed infused with a new sense of purpose. He had always been a man who preferred the comfort of routine, but now he saw the world with clearer eyes. He had glimpsed the dark undercurrents running beneath the Empire's polished surface and had played a crucial role in protecting it, even if no one else knew. The Empire, still recovering from the attempted coup, carried on with its daily operations. The public remained largely unaware of how close they had come to disaster, and the newsfeed spoke only of routine military maneuvers and the steady progress of imperial projects across the galaxy. Behind the scenes, however, those who had taken part in the conspiracy were quietly removed from their positions, replaced by loyalists who ensured the stability of the regime. Elias's role in all of this remained a closely guarded secret. Arya Voss, now promoted and with even greater responsibilities, made sure of it. She and Elias exchanged a few brief messages over the weeks that followed, each one reminding him that his efforts had not been forgotten, even if they remained in the shadows. As time passed, Elias found himself thinking more about what had transpired. He had always been content to live a quiet life, to do his part without drawing attention. But after everything that had happened, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had been changed by the experience. He had seen what was at stake, and he had risen to the challenge, something he never would have thought possible before. One day, while performing routine maintenance on one of the warp gate control panels, Elias noticed a young technician struggling with a complex repair. The technician, barely out of training, was clearly frustrated, and Elias could see that they were about to make a mistake that could disrupt the entire system. Without a second thought, Elias stepped in, his hands moving deftly to correct the issue. "Thanks," the technician muttered, clearly embarrassed. "I thought I had it, but this system is more complicated than the simulations." Elias nodded, giving the younger man a reassuring smile. "These systems have their quirks. You'll get the hang of it with time. Just remember to trust your instincts and never be afraid to ask for help." The technician looked up at him, clearly surprised. "I didn't think someone at your level would still be doing hands-on work. Most of the senior engineers just oversee things." Elias shrugged. "I've always believed that it's important to stay connected to the work, to understand every detail of the systems we rely on. It keeps you sharp and reminds you of why we're here." The technician nodded thoughtfully, clearly taking Elias's words to heart. As he walked away, Elias couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. He had spent years in the background, unnoticed and unappreciated, but now he realized that his work, even the small, seemingly insignificant moments, mattered. Every task he performed, every problem he solved, contributed to the greater good of the Empire. Weeks turned into months, and life on Arcturus continued much as it always had. The station was a vital hub in the Empire's infrastructure, and there was always work to be done. But Elias noticed something different in himself. He was more aware, more attuned to the subtle shifts in the atmosphere around him. He had developed a sense for when things weren't quite right, a skill honed during his investigation into the conspiracy. And though the station remained largely peaceful, Elias could never entirely shake the feeling that another crisis could arise at any moment. It was late one evening, during one of his solitary walks through the station's quieter corridors, that Elias's instincts once again alerted him to something amiss. The station was never truly silent, but tonight the usual background noises seemed off, like a melody played slightly out of tune. He paused, listening carefully, his eyes scanning the shadows for anything out of place. As he rounded a corner, Elias noticed a figure hunched over one of the access panels. The figure was dressed in a maintenance uniform, but their movements were furtive, almost nervous. Something about the scene didn't sit right with Elias, and he quietly approached, keeping to the shadows until he was close enough to see what the person was doing. To his surprise, he saw that they were attempting to bypass the security protocols on the panel, rerouting power from one of the auxiliary systems. It was an unusual procedure, one that could disrupt the station's operations if done improperly. Elias's mind raced. Could this be another attempt to sabotage the Empire? Was this a remnant of the conspiracy he had helped to thwart? Can I help you with something? Elias's voice was calm but firm as he stepped into the light, startling the figure. The person jumped, turning quickly to face Elias. It was a young woman, probably in her mid-20s, with a look of panic in her eyes. I was just performing routine maintenance, she stammered, clearly flustered. Elias didn't believe her for a second. Routine maintenance doesn't involve bypassing security protocols without authorization. Who are you, and what are you doing here? The woman's eyes darted around, clearly searching for an escape route, but Elias blocked her path. She was trapped, and she knew it. With a sigh, she seemed to deflate, the fight leaving her as she realized there was no way out. My name is Lyra, she admitted quietly. I'm with the Resistance. Elias raised an eyebrow. Resistance? Against the Empire? Lyra nodded, her expression resolute despite her fear. I'm not part of the original conspiracy you uncovered, but there are others who believe the Empire needs to change, who think the corruption goes deeper than you realize. Elias felt a chill run down his spine. He had thought the conspiracy was over, that the threat had been dealt with. But here was proof that unrest still simmered beneath the surface, that others were plotting in the shadows, just as the original conspirators had. What were you planning to do? Elias asked, his voice steady even as his mind raced through the possibilities. Lyra hesitated, then met his gaze with surprising honesty. I was going to disrupt the warp gate systems, create chaos that would draw attention to our cause. We believe that only through drastic action can we force the changes that are needed. Elias studied her for a long moment. She was young, passionate, and clearly believed in what she was doing. But her plan was reckless, and the consequences could be catastrophic. He could see that she was convinced she was doing the right thing, but Elias also knew the destruction and suffering that would follow if she succeeded. Lyra, he began, choosing his words carefully, I understand that you believe in your cause, but this isn't the way to bring about change. All you'll accomplish is hurting innocent people, causing the kind of chaos that could tear the Empire apart. Her expression wavered, doubt creeping into her eyes. But what choice do we have? The Empire is corrupt, and those in power won't listen to us. Elias sighed, remembering the weight of the responsibility he had carried during the coup. There's always a choice. You can work from within, find allies who share your views, and push for change through the proper channels. I've seen what happens when people try to force change through violence and subversion. It only leads to more suffering. Lyra looked down, clearly conflicted. Elias could see the struggle within her, the war between her convictions and the reality of what she was planning. Finally, she sighed and stepped back from the panel. You're right, she admitted. I don't want to hurt anyone, but I didn't know what else to do. Elias nodded, feeling a sense of relief. We'll find another way, one that doesn't involve causing harm. But first, we need to make sure this station remains secure. He reached out, deactivating the changes she had made to the panel and restoring the system to its normal operation. As he worked, he couldn't help but feel a sense of déjà vu. Once again, he was navigating the shadows, preventing a disaster that few would ever know about. When he was finished, he turned back to Lyra. I'm going to report this, but I'll make sure it's handled quietly. There's no need to escalate things further. Lyra nodded, her expression one of gratitude and resignation. Thank you, Elias. I didn't expect someone like you to understand. Elias offered her a small smile. "I've seen more than you might think. Just remember, there's always another way." As Lyra was escorted away by station security, Elias felt a strange mix of emotions. He had once again prevented a crisis, but this time it wasn't just about saving the Empire, it was about guiding someone who was lost, helping them find a better path. It was a reminder that the battles fought in the shadows weren't always against enemies, sometimes they were against the darkness within ourselves. Elias returned to his quarters that night, the events of the day weighing on his mind. The Empire was stable for now, but he knew that unrest would always be lurking beneath the surface, that there would always be those who sought to challenge the status quo. But as long as there were people willing to stand up and do what was right, there was hope. He sat down at his desk, pulling up the latest system reports. The work never ended, but that was okay. Elias had found his purpose, his place in the grand scheme of things. He was the nameless hero, the one who worked in the shadows to keep the Empire safe, and that was enough. As he reviewed the reports, a message notification blinked on his screen. It was from Arya, a simple note thanking him for his continued efforts and reminding him that his work was appreciated, even if it wasn't acknowledged publicly. Elias smiled to himself as he read the message. He didn't need public recognition or accolades, he had found something far more valuable. He had found his place, his purpose, and the knowledge that he was making a difference, even in the smallest of ways, and so, Elias Kane continued his work, quietly ensuring the stability and safety of the Empire. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless dangers and challenges, but Elias knew that as long as he was there, watching over the warp gates and the systems that held the Empire together, the future was secure. The story of Elias Kane, the nameless hero, was not one that would be told in history books or celebrated in public ceremonies. It was a story of quiet dedication, of unseen battles fought in the shadows, and of a man who found his purpose not in glory, but in service. And for Elias, that was more than enough. Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The sky had turned an impenetrable black, a darkness so complete that it seemed to swallow every trace of light. It was as if the sun had never existed, as if day had never dawned on Earth. For weeks now, the planet had been plunged into this unnatural night, a phenomenon that defied all scientific explanation. At first, there had been hope that it was a temporary anomaly, something that could be explained by the usual quirks of space. But as days turned into weeks and the darkness remained unbroken, that hope turned into fear, and then into despair. The global impact was immediate and catastrophic. Crops withered without sunlight, temperatures plummeted, and energy reserves dwindled as people relied on artificial light and heat to survive. The world was in chaos, a planet-wide panic that threatened to undo centuries of progress. But the worst was yet to come. The source of the eternal night was revealed in a broadcast that hijacked every screen, every radio wave, every form of communication known to humanity. A message from a mysterious alien civilization, the Nocturians, who claimed responsibility for the darkness that had gripped Earth. Their motives were clear: to weaken humanity's defenses, to sow fear and chaos, and to demand Earth's unconditional surrender. The message was delivered in a language that was both alien and familiar, as if the words were being translated by something that understood human speech but not human emotion. The Nocturians spoke of their advanced technology, their power to manipulate the very fabric of space, and their disdain for the primitive species that inhabited Earth. They offered a grim ultimatum: surrender, or face annihilation. World leaders scrambled to respond, but the situation was unlike anything they had ever faced. The Nocturians had not only taken away the light, they had also taken away hope. For weeks, the planet's governments were paralyzed, unable to come up with a plan that didn't involve outright surrender. But in the midst of the despair, a coalition of the world's brightest minds, scientists, military leaders, and arcane practitioners, came together. These were the people who had spent their lives pushing the boundaries of what was possible, and they were not ready to give up. In a secret facility deep beneath the surface of the Earth, these experts convened to find a solution. The facility was a relic of the Cold War, repurposed now for a battle that was unlike any other. The walls were lined with screens showing data from every corner of the globe, each one displaying the steady march of darkness across the planet. The atmosphere was tense, a mix of fear and determination. Dr. Eleanor Carter, a leading physicist specializing in energy weapons, was at the center of this effort. She was known for her brilliance, her ability to think outside the box, and her refusal to accept the impossible. Her mind raced as she reviewed the data, looking for a way to pierce the veil of darkness that surrounded the Earth. Beside her stood Aaron Drake, a powerful sorcerer and one of the few remaining practitioners of ancient light magic. He was tall and imposing, with a presence that seemed to command the very air around him. His robes were adorned with runes that glowed faintly, a reminder of the power he wielded. He had been skeptical of this alliance with science, but he knew that desperate times called for desperate measures. "We're missing something," Dr. Carter muttered, her eyes narrowing as she stared at the equations on the screen. "There's got to be a way to break through." "Science alone won't solve this," Aaron replied, his voice a low rumble. "The Nocturians are using a form of dark energy that's beyond your understanding. But combined with magic, there might be a way." Dr. Carter looked up at him, her skepticism clear. She had always viewed magic as little more than superstition, a relic of a bygone era. But as the days of darkness had stretched on, even she had to admit that there were forces at work that science alone couldn't explain. "What do you propose?" she asked, crossing her arms. Aaron stepped closer, his gaze intense. "A weapon that harnesses both the power of science and the ancient light magic. We create a beam of pure energy, something that can tear through the darkness and strike at the heart of the Nocturians' technology." Dr. Carter considered this for a moment, her mind racing through the possibilities. It was a long shot, a gamble with the fate of the world hanging in the balance. But it was also the only plan they had. "All right," she said finally. "Let's do it." The days that followed were a blur of activity as the task force set to work on the solstice cannon, a weapon that would combine the best of science and magic. The facility became a hive of activity, with scientists and magicians working side by side, their differences set aside in the face of a common enemy. The solstice cannon was a marvel of engineering and arcane power. It was massive, taking up an entire chamber deep within the Earth. The core of the weapon was a fusion reactor that drew power from the Earth's core, channeling it into a beam of pure energy. But that was only half of the equation. The true power of the cannon came from the ancient runes that Aaron and his fellow magicians inscribed into the weapon's framework. These runes, glowing with a light that seemed to come from another world, would focus the energy into a beam capable of cutting through the Nocturians' dark veil. But as with all great innovations, the development of the solstice cannon was fraught with challenges. The first test firing was a disaster. The beam, unstable and unfocused, caused massive destruction in the facility, nearly collapsing the entire chamber. The task force was divided, with some arguing that the weapon was too dangerous, that it would do more harm than good. But Dr. Carter and Aaron were resolute. They knew the risks, but they also knew that this was Earth's only chance. "There's no turning back now," Dr. Carter said as she and Aaron stood before the solstice cannon, which was being repaired and reinforced after the failed test. "We have to make this work." "We will," Aaron replied, his voice filled with quiet determination. "We have no other choice." As the team worked to stabilize the weapon, the Nocturians grew impatient. Their forces, which had been massing on the edge of the solar system, began to move. The Nocturians had underestimated humanity's resolve, but they were not about to let Earth mount a counteroffensive. They sent a new message, one that was even more ominous than the first. The Nocturian fleet was on its way, and Earth had mere days to prepare. The decision was made to launch the Solstice cannon before the Nocturian fleet arrived in full force. The plan was risky, but there was no other option. If they could break through the darkness and strike at the Nocturians before they reached Earth, they might have a chance to turn the tide. Earth's military was mobilized, every available fighter jet and warship readied for the coming battle. The skies were filled with the sounds of engines and the hum of energy weapons being primed. Aaron and his fellow magicians prepared powerful wards and barriers to protect the cannon from both physical and mystical attacks. Dr. Carter oversaw the final preparations, ensuring that the weapon's energy core was stable enough for the upcoming battle. As the day of reckoning approached, the tension in the facility was palpable. The Solstice cannon was charged and ready, but the outcome was far from certain. Dr. Carter and Aaron stood at the command console, their eyes locked on the screens that showed the approach of the Nocturian fleet. "This is it," Dr. Carter said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "We either break through, or we're finished." Aaron nodded, his expression grim. "We will succeed. The light will prevail." The first wave of Nocturian forces arrived in a flash of dark energy, their ships materializing out of the blackness like phantoms. They were sleek, almost organic in design, their hulls pulsing with an eerie, dark light. They launched waves of shadow-like drones, small and fast, designed to swarm and overwhelm their targets. Earth's defenses responded immediately, engaging the enemy with everything they had. The battle that ensued was brutal, a clash of technology and magic against the overwhelming power of the Nocturians. In the skies above Earth, fighter jets streaked through the darkness, their afterburners leaving trails of light as they dodged and weaved through the swarm of enemy drones. Warships, their massive guns blazing, fired volley after volley at the Nocturian warships that loomed above. The Earth's forces fought with unmatched determination, knowing that they were all that stood between humanity and annihilation, but despite their bravery, the Nocturians were relentless. The shadow drones swarmed over the warships, tearing through their hulls with beams of dark energy. Fighters were picked off one by one, their pilots fighting to the last moment before being consumed by the black void. Back at the facility, the Solstice cannon reached full power. The energy core hummed with a deep, resonant tone, the runes etched into its framework glowing with an otherworldly light. Dr. Carter and Aaron stood at the controls, their hands hovering over the activation switches. "Now." Dr. Carter shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Aaron chanted an incantation, his voice resonating with the power of the ancient magic. The runes flared to life, and the Solstice cannon unleashed its power. A massive beam of pure light shot out from the cannon, tearing through the darkness that had gripped the planet. It was a beam unlike any other, a fusion of science and magic, focused and powerful. The darkness recoiled as the light cut through it, a path of brightness that seemed to stretch infinitely into space. The beam struck the Nocturian fleet with devastating precision. Warships that had seemed invincible were torn apart, their dark hulls disintegrating in the face of the Solstice cannon's light. The shadow drones, once so fearsome, were vaporized in an instant. The sky, which had been a battleground of darkness and light, was now filled with the brilliant glow of the Solstice cannon. For the first time in weeks, rays of sunlight broke through the dark veil. It was a sight that brought tears to the eyes of every soldier, every civilian who saw it. The sun, which had been hidden for so long, was finally visible again. The sight of the sun gave Earth's forces renewed strength, and they pressed the attack with everything they had. The Nocturians, realizing they were outmatched, began to retreat. Their warships, once so formidable, turned and fled into deep space. The darkness that had gripped Earth began to dissipate, retreating with the Nocturian fleet. The eternal night was over, and the dawn of a new day began to light the sky. As the last of the Nocturian ships disappeared from the radar, a cheer went up from Earth's forces. The battle was won, and the planet was safe, for now. But the victory had come at a high cost. The skies were filled with the wreckage of destroyed ships, both human and Nocturian, and the Earth's surface bore the scars of the battle. In the aftermath, Dr. Carter and Aaron stood together on a hill overlooking the facility. The solstice cannon, now silent, loomed behind them, a monument to what had been achieved. "We did it," Dr. Carter said, her voice filled with relief and exhaustion. "Yes," Aaron replied, his tone somber. "But the Nocturians will return." This was only the beginning. Dr. Carter nodded, knowing he was right. The victory had been hard-won, but the threat of the Nocturians would not simply vanish. They would need to be vigilant, to be prepared for whatever came next. But for now, they could take solace in the fact that they had saved their world from certain destruction. The sun rose higher in the sky, bathing the Earth in golden light. It was a new day, a new beginning. And as the world began to rebuild, the alliance between science and magic was formalized, ensuring that humanity would be prepared for any future threats. The solstice cannon was just the first step, a symbol of what could be achieved when the best minds came together in a common cause. The story ends with Earth bathed in the light of a new dawn, the darkness defeated, and the promise of a brighter future on the horizon. Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. In the year 2156, humanity stood on the precipice of greatness. The dawn of the interstellar age had brought about unprecedented unity on Earth. Gone were the days of fractured nations and endless wars. Now, under the banner of the Earth United Government, EUG, humanity had set its sights on the stars. Colonies sprouted on nearby planets, and the dream of a galactic civilization felt within reach. The collective spirit of mankind was one of optimism and boundless potential. But as history has often shown, every ascent is met with a challenge, a test of survival. For Captain Elias Ward, the quiet hours before dawn were a time for reflection. The soft hum of the spaceship's engines, the faint glow of Earth in the viewport, and the distant twinkle of stars all seemed to resonate with the calm before a storm. Elias, a decorated military officer and strategist, had spent his entire career preparing for threats that might emerge from the unknown depths of space. Yet, as he sipped his coffee and stared into the abyss, he never imagined the scale of the horror that was about to descend upon his world. It began with a faint, inexplicable signal. The deep space sensors, ever vigilant, picked up something unusual, a distortion at the far edge of the Milky Way. At first, it was dismissed as a natural anomaly, perhaps a collapsing star or a rogue asteroid. But as days turned into weeks, the signal grew stronger, more defined, until it became clear that something, or someone, was approaching. Then, without warning, the outer colonies went dark. One by one, they vanished from the grid, their last transmissions filled with panic and despair. The nihil had arrived. No one knew where they came from or what their true motives were. The only certainty was their intent, annihilation. The nihil were a force unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, a race of beings that saw themselves as the galactic purifiers, destined to cleanse the universe of any species they deemed unworthy. Their technology was beyond comprehension, their ships vast and terrifying, blotting out the stars as they advanced. The first battles were catastrophic. Entire fleets were decimated in seconds, defenses crumbled, and the hopes of millions were dashed in a blinding flash of light. Elias was summoned to the EUG headquarters in New York, where the world's leaders gathered in a desperate bid to devise a plan. President Samantha Lee, a formidable leader known for her sharp mind and steely resolve, presided over the council. The air in the war room was thick with tension, the weight of impending doom pressing down on everyone present. Captain Ward, President Lee began, her voice steady but tinged with urgency, "We are out of options. Our fleets are no match for the Nihil. We need a new strategy, one that ensures the survival of our species, even if it means the loss of our home." Elias, who had always prided himself on finding solutions in the direst of circumstances, felt the gravity of the situation. He knew what the president was asking. It wasn't just about winning a battle, it was about preserving the essence of humanity itself. "We have one chance," Elias said, his voice low but firm. "Project Starfire." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him. Project Starfire was a highly classified operation, known only to a select few. Its goal was to create a seed, a condensed repository of all human knowledge, culture, and scientific achievements. This seed would be sent to the galactic core, far beyond the reach of the Nihil, where it could one day spark the rebirth of human civilization. This seed, Elias continued, will carry everything we are, everything we've accomplished. It will be our legacy, our fire in the darkness. We send it out there, and even if we fall, humanity will rise again. President Lee nodded slowly, the weight of the decision clear in her eyes. "Do it," she ordered. "Captain Ward, you are now in charge of Project Starfire. Make sure it succeeds." Elias immediately set to work. The best minds on Earth were brought together in an underground facility deep beneath the Rockies. Dr. Emily Harper, a brilliant astrophysicist with a mind that worked faster than the computers she programmed, led the scientific team. Colonel Marcus Vega, a veteran of countless skirmishes on distant worlds, was tasked with coordinating the military aspects of the project. The days turned into a blur of activity. Engineers worked around the clock, constructing the seed, a small, advanced probe named Aurora. This wasn't just any probe. Aurora was the culmination of humanity's greatest technological feats, designed to be nearly undetectable, with stealth systems that could evade even the most sophisticated sensors. Its AI was unlike anything ever built, a fusion of the world's greatest minds, capable of making decisions, adapting to threats, and ensuring the survival of the seed at all costs. As Aurora neared completion, the situation on Earth grew increasingly dire. The Nihil had broken through the outer defenses and were now advancing toward the solar system. The remaining fleets, though valiant, were no match for the sheer power of the Nihil's armada. Every hour brought news of another loss, another world falling into darkness. In the final days before the launch, Elias gathered his team for one last briefing. The room was filled with tension, but also a sense of resolve. They all knew the stakes. They were fighting not just for survival, but for the continuation of humanity itself. "We have one shot at this," Elias began, his voice calm but commanding. "Aurora must reach the galactic core. If we fail, everything we've worked for, everything we are, will be lost. But if we succeed, humanity will live on. Maybe not in our time, but in the future, in a distant star system, our descendants will look up at the stars and know where they came from." Dr. Harper, her eyes tired but determined, nodded. "Aurora is ready, Captain. She's been programmed with every contingency we could think of. She'll make it." Colonel Vega, ever the realist, spoke up. Our job is to give her the time she needs. The Nihil won't stop until they've wiped us out, but we can at least make sure Aurora gets away. The plan was set. As the Nihil closed in on Earth, the EUG prepared for a final stand. The last remaining ships, battered but not broken, were deployed to the front lines. Captain Ward, leading the charge, knew that this was a suicide mission. The goal wasn't to win but to distract, to buy just enough time for Aurora to escape. The final battle was a spectacle of chaos and destruction. The skies above Earth were lit with the flashes of energy weapons, the dark silhouettes of Nihil warships looming ominously. Elias piloted his ship with precision, every move calculated to draw the enemy's attention. Beside him, Colonel Vega coordinated the defense, barking orders through the comms, his voice a steady anchor in the storm. "Hold the line." Vega shouted as a Nihil dreadnought tore through the ranks of the Earth fleet. "We need to give Aurora time." Elias watched the countdown on his display, every second feeling like an eternity. They were being pushed back, the Nihil's relentless advance leaving little room for hope. But then, finally, the signal came through. Aurora had launched. "Mission accomplished," Elias said, a mix of relief and sorrow in his voice. Aurora is away. The team had done it. The seed of humanity was on its way to the galactic core, beyond the reach of the Nihil. But there was no time for celebration. The Nihil were closing in, and Earth's defenses were crumbling. "Captain," Vega said, his voice softer now, "it's been an honor." "Likewise, Marcus," Elias replied, his gaze fixed on the enemy ships bearing down on them. "For Earth. For humanity." With a final command, Elias directed his ship straight toward the heart of the Nihil fleet, drawing their fire away from Aurora. The explosion that followed was blinding, a final act of defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. Aurora, now free from the chaos, embarked on its journey. The AI, with the combined wisdom of humanity's greatest minds, guided the probe through the void, avoiding Nihil patrols and navigating treacherous cosmic phenomena. The journey was long and perilous, but Aurora was relentless, driven by the mission to preserve the essence of humanity. As the centuries passed, Aurora's journey became a legend, a story whispered among the stars. The probe reached the galactic core, finding a star system far from the reach of the Nihil. There, it began the process of terraforming a planet, preparing it to be the cradle of a new human civilization, and so, humanity was reborn. In the distant future, in a star system light years from Earth, a new society emerged, built on the knowledge and culture preserved within Aurora. The people, unaware of their origins, lived in harmony, their civilization a testament to the resilience and indomitable spirit of the species that once called Earth home. In the final moments of the story, we see a new generation, descendants of Earth, looking up at the stars. They wonder about their place in the galaxy, sensing that they are part of something much larger, something ancient and powerful. The legacy of humanity lives on, a fire that will never be extinguished, burning brightly in the darkness of space. As the new civilization began to flourish on the distant planet, far from the reach of the Nihil, the echoes of Earth's final days faded into myth. The inhabitants of this reborn society, though unaware of their true origins, carried within them the essence of humanity, an unyielding curiosity, a drive to explore, and a relentless pursuit of knowledge. The legacy of Aurora was woven into their very being, guiding them as they built cities, developed new technologies, and reached for the stars once more. Generations passed, and the memory of the great exodus from Earth became a legend, a story told around firesides and in classrooms, passed down from parent to child. The inhabitants called their new world Nova Terra, the New Earth, and it became a beacon of hope in a galaxy still recovering from the scars of the Nihil's wrath. The people of Nova Terra believed themselves to be the first of their kind, born from the elements of the universe, with no knowledge of the ancient world that had birthed them, yet, deep within the archives of their most advanced city, hidden beneath layers of rock and technology, lay the remnants of Aurora. The AI, though dormant for centuries, still held within it the full history of humanity, the wars, the triumphs, the cultures, and the knowledge of the distant past. It waited patiently, knowing that one day, the descendants of Earth would be ready to learn the truth. Among the inhabitants of Nova Terra was a young scientist named Leora, whose insatiable curiosity and brilliance had earned her a place among the elite scholars of the planet. Leora was driven by a desire to understand the origins of her people, a question that had haunted her since childhood. The stories of the Old Ones, of gods who had descended from the stars, fascinated her, and she dedicated her life to uncovering the truth behind the legends. Leora's research led her to the deepest corners of Nova Terra's archives, where she stumbled upon ancient records that hinted at a time before Nova Terra, a time when her ancestors had lived on a different world. These records were fragmented, damaged by time and the elements, but they pointed to a single location, an underground vault long forgotten by the inhabitants of the planet. Driven by a mixture of excitement and trepidation, Leora embarked on a journey to find the vault. She was joined by a small team of trusted colleagues, each as determined as she was to uncover the mysteries of their past. They traveled for days across the rugged terrain of Nova Terra, facing harsh weather and dangerous wildlife, until they finally arrived at the site indicated in the ancient records. The entrance to the vault was hidden beneath a mountain, its doors sealed by layers of technology far beyond anything the people of Nova Terra had ever encountered. Leora and her team worked tirelessly to decode the ancient locks, their excitement growing with each passing hour. When the door finally slid open with a hiss, they were met with a sight that took their breath away, a vast chamber, filled with the preserved relics of a civilization long gone. In the center of the chamber stood Aurora, its sleek form still as pristine as the day it had been launched from Earth. The AI within, sensing the presence of living beings, began to awaken, its systems coming online after centuries of dormancy. Leora approached the probe with reverence, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached out to touch it, and as her fingers brushed against its surface, the AI spoke for the first time in over 1,000 years. "Welcome," Aurora said, its voice smooth and calm, a perfect blend of human and machine. "You are the descendants of Earth. The legacy of your ancestors lies within me." Leora and her team stared in awe as holographic displays flickered to life around them, projecting images of a world they had never known. They saw the blue-green planet of Earth, its cities and landscapes, its people in their final days before the arrival of the Nihil. They watched as the story of Project Starfire unfolded before their eyes, the creation of Aurora, the desperate battle to launch the probe, and the ultimate sacrifice of those who had given their lives to ensure humanity's survival. Tears streamed down Leora's face as she realized the magnitude of what they had discovered. The legends were true, her people were not the first, but the reborn descendants of a civilization that had nearly been lost to the void. The knowledge contained within Aurora was beyond anything she had ever imagined: ancient technologies, scientific principles, and cultural artifacts that could propel Nova Terra into a new era of enlightenment. As the truth of their origin spread across Nova Terra, the people were united in a way they had never been before. The story of Earth became a source of pride, a reminder of their resilience and the sacrifices made by their ancestors. Leora, now recognized as one of the greatest minds of her time, led the effort to integrate the ancient knowledge into their society, sparking a renaissance of innovation and discovery. But with this newfound knowledge came a renewed sense of responsibility. The people of Nova Terra knew that the Nihil, though long gone from their corner of the galaxy, still posed a threat to other civilizations. The AI within Aurora had warned them of this, of the countless other species that had fallen to the Nihil's relentless purge. And so, the people of Nova Terra vowed to honor the legacy of their ancestors by using their newfound power to protect and uplift other species across the galaxy. Under Leora's leadership, Nova Terra began to build a fleet of advanced starships, each one equipped with technology derived from the ancient knowledge of Earth. These ships were not built for conquest, but for exploration and defense, a means to seek out other civilizations and offer them the same hope that Aurora had brought to them. The people of Nova Terra would become the guardians of the galaxy, a force for good in a universe still reeling from the scars of the Nihil. And so, the descendants of Earth once again took to the stars, not as conquerors, but as saviors. They traveled to distant worlds, sharing their knowledge and technology, forming alliances with other species, and standing as a bulwark against the forces of darkness. The galaxy, once a place of fear and uncertainty, began to heal under their watchful gaze. Leora, now an elder stateswoman, watched with pride as the fleet set out on its first mission. The ships, gleaming in the light of Nova Terra's sun, were a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity. As they disappeared into the void, she knew that the legacy of Earth would never be forgotten. The fire that had been lit so many centuries ago would continue to burn, brighter than ever, illuminating the path for generations to come. And somewhere, in the depths of space, the Nihil would feel the presence of this new force, a force born from the ashes of a civilization they had once sought to destroy. The Nihil would come to understand that while they had sought to extinguish the fire of humanity, they had only succeeded in spreading its embers across the galaxy. Those embers had now ignited into a blaze, one that would challenge their dominance and protect the countless lives they had once threatened. The story of Earth, of Aurora, and of the people of Nova Terra would be told across the stars for millennia. It was a story of survival, of sacrifice, and of the unbreakable bond between the past and the future. And as long as the stars continued to shine, so too would the legacy of humanity, a beacon of hope in an ever-changing universe. Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The base was under attack, and everything that Jack Marlowe knew was crumbling around him. The screams of men, the shriek of metal as it was torn apart by the savage alien creatures, and the incessant alarm blaring through the underground facility fused into a cacophony of chaos that threatened to overwhelm him. But Jack, a seasoned mechanic with grease-stained hands and a mind wired for understanding machines, had no time to process the horror unfolding around him. He had never intended to be a soldier. His world was one of tools, blueprints, and the hum of machinery, tucked safely away in the depths of the Earth where the war seemed like a distant nightmare. But now, the nightmare had come to him. The Zorgoth had breached the perimeter, and the base was in shambles. The alien creatures, twice as tall as a man, with razor-sharp claws and armored hides, were a relentless force that had pushed humanity to the brink. Jack was huddled in the corner of the workshop, hands trembling as he tried to focus on the task before him. The Aegis armor, the only thing standing between humanity and total annihilation, was lying open on the floor, its intricate circuitry exposed like the guts of a living creature. Jack knew these machines better than anyone. He had spent years maintaining them, fine-tuning them for the soldiers who wore them into battle. But he had never been inside one, never felt the weight of it, never experienced the terrifying fusion of man and machine. The door to the workshop burst open, and Jack looked up to see Commander Riley, his face smeared with blood and grime, his eyes wide with desperation. "Marlowe, we need you out there," Riley barked, his voice hoarse from shouting orders. "We've lost too many men. The line's breaking." Jack's heart pounded in his chest. "I'm a mechanic," not a soldier," he stammered, wiping his hands on his already filthy coveralls. Riley grabbed Jack by the collar, pulling him to his feet. "You know these suits better than anyone. If anyone can make a difference out there, it's you." Jack shook his head, panic rising in his throat. "I can't, there's no one else left," Riley roared, shoving him toward the armor. "Get in the damn suit, Marlowe." The weight of the commander's words crashed over Jack like a wave. He stared at the armor, its metallic sheen reflecting the flickering lights of the workshop. The world outside was crumbling, and here he was, standing on the precipice of a choice he had never wanted to make. With trembling hands, Jack approached the Aegis armor. The suit loomed over him, its cold, lifeless eyes staring back at him as if daring him to step inside. He hesitated for a moment longer, then reached out and touched the smooth metal surface. It was cool to the touch, almost soothing in a way, like the machines he had worked on all his life. But this was different. This was war. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. "All right," he muttered, more to himself than to Riley. "All right, let's do this." The armor opened with a hiss, revealing the complex web of wires and circuitry within. Jack stepped inside, the cold metal pressing against his body as the suit began to close around him. The sensation was unlike anything he had ever experienced, an overwhelming rush of data flooding his brain as the suit's neural interface connected with his mind. His vision blurred, then sharpened as the suit's HUD flickered to life, displaying a wealth of information he had only ever seen on screens. The armor was heavy, but not unbearably so. It moved with him, responding to his slightest movements with precision and speed. Jack flexed his fingers, watching as the suit's gauntlet hands mimicked his actions perfectly. It was strange, feeling the machine as an extension of his own body, yet separate from it. Riley slapped him on the back, a rare smile breaking through the grime on his face. "You look like a natural," he said, though the words were tinged with desperation. Jack didn't feel like a natural. He felt like a man about to walk into hell. But there was no turning back now. He had to try, if not for himself, then for the people who were dying out there. "Let's go," Jack said, his voice sounding strange in his ears, distorted by the suit's internal comms. Riley led the way out of the workshop, and Jack followed, the armor's servos whirring softly as he moved. The base was a war zone. The corridors were littered with debris, broken equipment, shattered glass, and the bodies of soldiers who had fallen in the initial assault. The walls were scorched and blackened from energy blasts, and the air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning metal. As they approached the outer defenses, the sounds of battle grew louder, the roar of gunfire, the guttural growls of the Zorgoth, the screams of the wounded and dying. Jack's heart raced, every instinct telling him to turn back, to run and hide. But he forced himself to keep moving, each step bringing him closer to the chaos outside. They reached the breach in the outer wall, where the alien forces were pouring through like a flood. The soldiers who remained were fighting with a desperation born of hopelessness, their weapons barely making a dent in the alien horde. The Aegis armor units were doing their best to hold the line, but they were outnumbered, and the Zorgoth were relentless. Riley pointed to a group of soldiers pinned down by a particularly large group of Zorgoth. "Over there," he said. "They need backup." Jack nodded, his mouth dry as sandpaper. He raised the armor's gauntlet, feeling the familiar weight of the plasma cannon integrated into the suit's arm. It was a weapon he had worked on countless times, but never fired. Now, it was his only lifeline. He aimed at the nearest Zorgoth, a towering brute with armor-like scales and glowing red eyes. His finger tightened on the trigger, and the cannon fired with a deafening roar. The plasma bolt struck the creature square in the chest, burning through its thick hide and sending it crashing to the ground with a pained roar. The other soldiers cheered, their spirits momentarily lifted by the sight of the creature falling. But Jack barely heard them. He was focused on the battle, on the countless other Zorgoth that were closing in. He fired again, and again, each shot a desperate attempt to stem the tide. For a few minutes, it seemed to work. The Zorgoth hesitated, their advance slowing as they took note of the new threat. But then, with a deafening roar, they surged forward once more, a tidal wave of claws and teeth that threatened to overwhelm the human defenders. Jack fought with everything he had, every shot fired with deadly precision. But it wasn't enough. The Zorgoth were too many, too powerful. The human soldiers were being pushed back, inch by inch, their resolve crumbling under the relentless assault, and then, just when it seemed all hope was lost, Jack saw it, a pattern in the chaos. The Zorgoth weren't just mindless beasts, they were moving with a purpose, following some kind of strategy. He watched as they attacked in coordinated waves, their movements synchronized in a way that seemed almost mechanical. It was then that Jack realized the truth. The Zorgoth were being controlled, guided by some kind of central intelligence. And if he could find that intelligence, if he could disrupt their command structure, he might be able to turn the tide of the battle. "Commander!" Jack shouted into the comms, his voice cutting through the noise of battle. "The Zorgoth, they're being controlled. There's a command signal. If we can jam it, we can break their coordination." Riley's voice crackled in his ear, tinged with disbelief. "Are you sure?" "Positive," Jack replied, his mind racing as he pieced together the clues. "I've seen this kind of thing before, in the way machines interact with each other. They're acting like a network. Take out the hub, and the rest will fall apart." There was a pause on the other end, then Riley's voice came back, filled with a renewed sense of urgency. "All right, Marlowe. You're the expert. What do you need?" Jack scanned the battlefield, his HUD displaying a chaotic mess of information. He focused on the source of the signal, filtering out the noise until he found it, a faint, but unmistakable pulse of energy emanating from the heart of the Zorgoth forces. "There," he shouted, marking the location on the map. "That's where the signal's coming from. We need to get there and shut it down." Riley didn't hesitate. "All units, follow Marlowe's lead. We're taking out that signal." The soldiers rallied around Jack, their fear replaced by a grim determination. They had a goal now, a purpose beyond mere survival. Jack led the charge, the Aegis armor's servos straining as he pushed forward, cutting a path through the alien horde. The closer they got to the signal, the stronger the resistance became. The Zorgoth seemed to sense the threat, throwing everything they had at the human forces in a desperate attempt to protect their command center. But Jack was relentless, his mind focused on the task at hand, every shot fired with precision and purpose. Finally, they reached the source of the signal, a massive Zorgoth creature, larger than any of the others, its body bristling with strange, glowing appendages. It stood at the center of a clearing, surrounded by a group of smaller Zorgoth, all of them seemingly connected to the larger creature by a web of energy. "This is it," Jack muttered to himself, his heart pounding in his chest. "This is the hub." He raised his plasma cannon, aiming for the creature's head. But before he could fire, the creature let out a deafening roar, the energy around it crackling with intensity. The ground shook as the creature unleashed a wave of energy, knocking the soldiers off their feet and sending Jack crashing to the ground. For a moment, everything went black. Jack's ears rang, his body aching from the impact. But he forced himself to get up, the armor systems struggling to reboot. He couldn't afford to stay down, not now, not when they were so close that he pushed himself to his feet, his vision swimming as he tried to focus on the creature. It was still standing, its glowing eyes locked onto him with a malevolent intelligence. The smaller Zorgoth were closing in, ready to finish him off, but Jack wasn't about to give up. Not now. Not when the fate of the world was on the line. With a roar of defiance, he charged at the creature, the plasma cannon firing with reckless abandon. The bolts of energy struck the creature, burning through its armored hide and causing it to stumble. The smaller Zorgoth tried to intervene, but Jack fought them off, his mind and body working in perfect harmony with the suit. He reached the creature, his hands gripping the cannon as he pressed it against the creature's head. With a final, desperate effort, he pulled the trigger, unleashing a torrent of energy that blasted through the creature's skull, tearing it apart from the inside. The creature let out a final, pained roar, then collapsed to the ground, its body disintegrating into ash as the energy dissipated. The smaller Zorgoth froze, their connection to the hub severed. For a moment, they stood motionless, as if unsure of what to do. Then, one by one, they began to fall, their bodies crumbling as the network that had sustained them disintegrated. The battle was over. The human forces had won. Jack stood there, panting heavily, his body trembling with exhaustion. He looked around at the battlefield, at the bodies of the fallen soldiers, at the smoldering remains of the Zorgoth. The base was in ruins, but it was still standing. Earth was still standing. Riley's voice crackled in his ear. "Marlowe, you did it. You saved us." Jack didn't respond, too exhausted to speak. He simply nodded, his mind still reeling from the battle. He had never wanted to be a hero, never wanted to be on the front lines. But in that moment, he had been exactly what humanity needed. As the adrenaline began to fade, Jack felt the weight of the armor pressing down on him, the exhaustion creeping into his bones. He wanted nothing more than to collapse, to sleep for days, but there was still work to be done. He made his way back to the base, his movements slow and deliberate. The other soldiers parted for him, their faces a mix of awe and gratitude. Jack barely noticed them, his mind focused on the workshop, on the machines that awaited him there. When he finally reached the workshop, he stepped out of the armor, the cold air biting at his skin as the suit disengaged. He felt a strange sense of loss as the armor was removed, as if a part of him had been left behind, but there was no time to dwell on it. The armor needed repairs, the base needed rebuilding, and there were still Zorgoth out there, somewhere in the darkness. Jack picked up his tools, his hands steady despite the fatigue. He had a job to do, and he would see it through to the end. Because that's who he was, a mechanic, a man who fixed things. The world had been broken, but he had helped to fix it. And as long as there was work to be done, as long as there were machines that needed tending, he would be there, doing what he did best. He glanced at the armor, now resting in the corner of the workshop, and felt a strange connection to it. It had saved his life, and he had saved it. They had saved each other. With a sigh, Jack returned to his work, the sounds of the workshop familiar and comforting. The war wasn't over, but for now, there was peace. And in that peace, Jack found a small measure of contentment. As he worked, he allowed himself a moment to think about the future, about what would come next. The world was still a dangerous place, filled with threats that lurked in the shadows. But Jack knew that, whatever happened, he would be ready because he was more than just a mechanic now. He was a soldier, a fighter, a man who had faced the darkness and come out the other side, and he was ready for whatever came next. Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. In the cold vacuum of space, silence was absolute, yet it carried the weight of a looming storm. From the observation deck of the Hyperion, Earth's most advanced spacecraft, Dr. Elara Bennett stared into the vast, unyielding blackness of the void. Even with all her knowledge of xenobiology, the void unsettled her, an endless abyss that swallowed light and hope alike. Yet, somewhere in that void lay the source of the greatest threat humanity had ever faced. Her hand tightened around the railing as she contemplated the mission ahead. The reports had been fragmented at first, unexplained energy surges, missing spacecraft, and finally, the first encounter with an alien species unlike anything humanity had imagined. The aliens had emerged from the void, their ships sleek and otherworldly, their technology surpassing anything on Earth. But it wasn't just their technology that had sent shockwaves through humanity, it was the biological weapons they unleashed, creatures that seemed to defy the laws of nature, melding metal with flesh in ways that were both horrific and awe-inspiring. The invasion had been swift and brutal, targeting Earth's major cities with precision. The response from the world's governments was immediate. An emergency coalition was formed, and within days, the brightest minds and most skilled operatives were gathered to form an elite team tasked with stopping the invasion at its source. They were to venture into the void, locate the alien mothership, and destroy it before it could unleash further devastation. Ilara turned away from the window as the door to the observation deck slid open. Colonel Jack Reynolds stepped inside, his expression as steely as ever. A decorated military strategist, Reynolds was the embodiment of discipline and experience. He had seen more battles than any other officer aboard the Hyperion, and his presence alone was enough to instill confidence in the team. Dr. Bennett, Reynolds greeted, his voice low and gravelly, a result of years spent shouting commands over the din of battle. Colonel, Ilara replied with a nod. Any updates? We've just received intel from command. The forward base we're targeting is confirmed to be a key node in the alien supply chain. It's heavily fortified, but if we can take it out, it should give us the upper hand. Ilara nodded, though her mind was already racing through the possibilities. The alien biology was unlike anything she had studied before, complex, adaptive, and seemingly engineered to thrive in the most hostile environments. She knew that understanding it would be crucial to their success, but there was so much they still didn't know. As if sensing her thoughts, Reynolds added, "We'll need your expertise once we're on the ground, Doctor. The intel we have is limited, and we'll be relying on you to identify any weaknesses we can exploit." "I'll do what I can," Ilara replied, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "But we're venturing into the unknown. There's no telling what we'll find." Reynolds gave her a reassuring look, one that spoke of his confidence in her abilities. "That's why you're here, Doctor. You're the best there is. We'll handle the tactical side, but we need you to make sure we're fighting a battle we can win." Ilara offered a small, determined smile. "I won't let you down." "Good," Reynolds said, turning to leave. "We'll be briefing the rest of the team in an hour. I suggest you get some rest while you can." As the door slid shut behind him, Ilara remained by the window, her thoughts a whirlwind of fear and anticipation. This was no ordinary mission. This was humanity's last stand against an enemy they barely understood. She could only hope that their ingenuity and determination would be enough to tip the scales in their favor. The team assembled in the briefing room an hour later, the atmosphere tense with unspoken fears and expectations. The room was dimly lit, the walls adorned with holographic displays showing tactical maps, alien schematics, and mission objectives. At the center of the room stood a large circular table, around which the team gathered. Colonel Reynolds stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding the room's attention. Beside him was Sophia Kane, the team's void navigation expert. Sophia was a tall, athletic woman with a sharp gaze and an air of confidence that bordered on arrogance. She had earned her place on the team through years of daring exploration, charting uncharted regions of space where few dared to venture. Her knowledge of the void was unparalleled, and she would be their guide through the treacherous journey ahead. Lieutenant Kai Tanaka was next to arrive, his demeanor calm and collected. A cybernetic engineer with a deep understanding of advanced technology and AI, Kai had a reputation for being a problem solver. His modifications to the Hyperion systems had already proven invaluable, and his role would be critical once they encountered the alien technology. As the last team member, Elara, took her seat, Reynolds began the briefing. "We're about to enter hostile territory," he said, his voice steady and authoritative. "Our mission is to locate and destroy the alien forward base. It's our best shot at disrupting their supply chain and buying us the time we need to find the mothership." The holographic display flickered, revealing a three-dimensional model of the alien base. It was a sprawling structure, bristling with defensive turrets and surrounded by a swarm of alien drones. "Our approach will be through a blind spot we've identified in their defense grid," Reynolds continued. "Sophia will navigate us through the void, and once we're in range, Kai will hack into their systems to disable their defenses. Elara, you'll be responsible for analyzing any biological threats we encounter and finding a way to neutralize them." Elara nodded, her mind already working through potential scenarios. The alien biology was still a mystery, but she had theories, hypotheses she would have to test under the most extreme conditions. "We'll strike fast and hard," Reynolds concluded. "This is our chance to turn the tide. We can't afford to fail." The team members exchanged determined looks, their resolve solidifying. They were about to embark on the most dangerous mission of their lives, but they were united in their purpose. The fate of humanity rested on their shoulders. As the Hyperion left the safety of known space and entered the void, the sense of foreboding deepened. The void was an unforgiving place, a region of space where the laws of physics seemed to break down. Time and space warped, light bent in impossible ways, and the very fabric of reality seemed to twist and shift. Sophia Kane was at the helm, her hand steady on the controls as she guided the ship through the darkness. The Hyperion sensors were on high alert, scanning for any signs of danger, but the void was eerily silent, offering no clues as to what lay ahead. "Stay sharp," Reynolds' voice crackled over the comms. "We're in enemy territory now." The team was on edge, every shadow and flicker of light a potential threat. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the soft hum of the ship's engines and the occasional beep of the sensors. But the real danger was unseen, lurking in the darkness just beyond their reach. Elara sat in the med bay, reviewing the data they had on the alien biology. The creatures they had encountered so far were unlike anything she had ever seen, biomechanical hybrids with a terrifying level of adaptability. They seemed to be able to integrate any technology they encountered, evolving at an alarming rate. It was this ability that made them so dangerous, and it was up to her to find a way to stop them. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden alert. "We've got something," Sophia's voice came over the comms, tense with urgency. Elara quickly made her way to the bridge, where the team was already gathered around the main console. The holographic display showed a massive structure looming in the darkness, a forward base, exactly as the intel had described. "That's it," Reynolds said, his eyes narrowing. "Prepare for infiltration." The Hyperion approached the base cautiously, keeping to the shadows as much as possible. The alien defenses were formidable, with swarms of drones patrolling the perimeter and automated turrets scanning for intruders. Kai Tanaka was already at work, his fingers flying over the controls as he hacked into the base's systems. "I'm in," he said after a tense moment. "Disabling their defense grid now." The base's turrets powered down, and the drone swarms scattered in confusion. "We're clear," Kai confirmed. "Move in," Reynolds ordered. "Sophia, take us in close. Elara, Kai, get ready to board. The Hyperion docked with the base, and the team suited up, their gear designed for both combat and survival in the harsh environment of the void. They moved with practiced efficiency, checking each other's equipment and weapons before entering the airlock. The door hissed open, and they stepped into the alien structure. The interior was dark and ominous, with walls made of a strange, organic material that pulsed with a faint, eerie glow. The air was thick with a foul odor, a mix of metal and decay. Elara's heart pounded as they moved deeper into the base. Her senses were on high alert, every sound and movement amplified in the oppressive silence. They encountered no resistance at first, the corridors eerily empty, but they all knew it was only a matter of time. They reached a large chamber that appeared to be the base's control center. The room was filled with strange, alien machinery, and at its center was a massive structure that seemed to be some sort of central hub, pulsating with energy. "That's it," Kai said, his voice tinged with awe. "That's their command center. If we take it out, it should cripple the entire base." "Let's do it," Reynolds said, his voice calm and steady. As Kai began to set the charges, the walls of the chamber suddenly came alive. Alien creatures emerged from hidden alcoves, their bodies a grotesque blend of metal and flesh, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "Contact!" Sophia shouted, raising her weapon. The team sprang into action, their training kicking in as they engaged the enemy. The aliens moved with terrifying speed, their bodies contorting in ways that defied logic. Elara fired her weapon, her shots finding their mark, but the creatures kept coming, their wounds healing almost instantly. "They're regenerating." Elara shouted, her voice filled with alarm. "I'm working on it," Kai called back, frantically adjusting the settings on his device. "Just keep them off me." Elara scanned the room, her mind racing. The aliens were regenerating too quickly, there had to be something keeping them alive. Her eyes locked onto the central hub, and she realized what it was. The hub wasn't just a control center, it was also feeding energy to the creatures, keeping them alive. "We need to take out the hub," she shouted. "It's feeding them energy." Reynolds nodded, understanding immediately. "Cover Kai. We need those charges set now." The team redoubled their efforts, fighting off the relentless onslaught of aliens as Kai worked to plant the charges. The creatures were relentless, their numbers seemingly endless, but the team held their ground, their determination unwavering. Finally, with a shout of triumph, Kai finished setting the charges. "It's done. Get clear." The team sprinted towards the exit, the aliens in hot pursuit. The walls of the base shook as the charges detonated, the explosion tearing through the structure. The central hub erupted in a burst of energy, and the aliens faltered, their bodies convulsing as the life drained from them. The team barely made it back to the Hyperion as the base began to collapse. They watched from the safety of the ship as the alien structure imploded, the void swallowing it whole. "We did it," Elara breathed, her body trembling with adrenaline and relief, but the victory was short-lived. The Hyperion sensors detected a massive energy spike. Another alien ship was closing in on their position. "It's the mothership," Reynolds said grimly. "It's here." The team had no time to rest. The mothership was a behemoth, dwarfing the Hyperion in size. Its exterior was a twisted amalgamation of metal and organic matter, pulsating with a sickly light. The ship was alive, a hive mind controlling the alien forces with ruthless efficiency. Sophia Kane pushed the Hyperion's engines to their limits as they raced towards the mothership. They had one chance to stop the invasion, and they were going to take it. As they approached the mothership, the void around them seemed to warp, reality twisting in unnatural ways. The ship was surrounded by a swarm of alien fighters, each one more deadly than the last. "Prepare for battle," Reynolds ordered. "This is it." The Hyperion's weapon systems roared to life, unleashing a barrage of firepower on the alien fighters. The team worked in unison, their movements precise and coordinated. Sophia maneuvered the ship with expert skill, dodging incoming fire while Kai and Alara manned the weapons, but the mothership was relentless, its fighters swarming the Hyperion from all sides. The ship shook under the assault, alarms blaring as damage reports flooded in. "We're not going to last much longer," Kai warned, his voice tight with tension. "We don't need to," Reynolds replied. "We just need to get close enough to deliver the final blow." Alara's mind raced as she analyzed the mothership's structure. The ship was a living organism, its core pulsating with energy. If they could hit that core, they might be able to destroy the entire ship. "There," she said, pointing to a weak spot in the ship's hull. "If we can breach that, we can hit the core." Sophia nodded, her expression determined. "Hold on tight." The Hyperion dove towards the mothership, its weapons focused on the weak spot. The alien fighters closed in, their attacks growing more desperate as they realized what the team was trying to do. The ship shook violently as it took hit after hit, but the team held on, their resolve unshakable. The weak spot in the mothership's hull grew closer and closer, until finally, with a deafening roar, the Hyperion's weapons breached the hull. "Now!" Reynolds shouted. The Hyperion fired its last remaining missile, aimed directly at the mothership's core. The missile streaked through the breach and struck the core, detonating with a blinding flash of light. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The void was silent, the alien fighters frozen in place as the mothership's core began to implode. Then, with a sound that reverberated through the entire void, the mothership erupted in a massive explosion, its energy dissipating into nothingness. The alien fighters disintegrated, their connection to the hive mind severed. The void was once again silent, but this time it was the silence of victory. The Hyperion limped away from the wreckage, its systems battered but still functional. The team was exhausted, their bodies and minds pushed to the limit, but they had done it. They had saved humanity. As they made their way back to Earth, the team sat in silence, each of them lost in their own thoughts. The mission had cost them dearly, and they knew that the void would always hold dangers that humanity was not yet prepared to face, but for now, they had bought humanity time. Time to regroup, to rebuild, and to prepare for whatever might come next. Alara stared out at the void, her thoughts a mix of relief and dread. The void was an endless mystery, a place where the unknown reigned supreme. But it was also a place of infinite possibilities, where humanity's greatest strengths, its creativity, its resilience, and its determination, could shine the brightest. The team had faced the void and emerged victorious, but the story of humanity's struggle was far from over. The void still called to them, a reminder of the challenges that lay ahead. And as the Hyperion sailed through the stars, Alara knew that humanity would rise to meet those challenges, no matter what the void had in store. The mission was over, but the hunt was just beginning. Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. On the distant planet of Nova Terra, the dense jungle canopy stretched endlessly, casting a green-tinged shadow over the research outpost below. The air was thick with humidity, a constant reminder of the untamed wilderness surrounding the colony. Dr. Alara Kane, a renowned xenobiologist, stood at the edge of a small clearing, her eyes fixed on the glowing pool of liquid at her feet. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, a shimmering substance that seemed to pulse with a life of its own, radiating an otherworldly energy. Alara knelt down, carefully extracting a sample with her gloved hand. The liquid clung to the glass vial, almost as if it were alive, its surface rippling with an inner light. She had been on Nova Terra for nearly a decade, studying the planet's unique ecosystem, but nothing had prepared her for this discovery. The substance, which she had named evilite, was unlike any known element or compound. Its properties were extraordinary, accelerating cellular growth, enhancing physical attributes, and even altering DNA at a fundamental level. Back at the outpost, Ilara's team of scientists had been running tests for weeks, and the results were nothing short of miraculous. Plants exposed to evilite grew to maturity in hours, developing resilience and traits that took millennia to evolve naturally. Animals became stronger, faster, smarter. The implications for humanity were staggering. Evilite could revolutionize medicine, agriculture, even human evolution itself, but Ilara also understood the risks. Evolution was a double-edged sword, and the rapid changes induced by evilite could lead to unforeseen consequences. The potential for misuse was immense. As word of her discovery spread, it wasn't long before the Earth government took notice. The potential strategic advantages of evilite were too significant to ignore. Ilara's thoughts were interrupted by the distant hum of engines. She looked up to see a fleet of sleek, black ships descending from the sky, their surfaces gleaming in the midday sun. The Earth government had sent reinforcements, a special forces unit known as Strike Team Echo, led by Commander Alec Mason, a veteran of countless battles across the galaxy. As the ships touched down in the clearing, Ilara felt a sense of unease. She had devoted her life to the pursuit of knowledge, to understanding the mysteries of the universe. But now, her discovery had become a catalyst for conflict, a resource to be protected and fought over. Commander Mason emerged from the lead ship, his tall, muscular frame clad in advanced combat armor. His face was lined with scars, a testament to his years of service. He approached Ilara, his piercing blue eyes scanning the surroundings with the practiced vigilance of a soldier. Dr. Kane, he greeted her, his voice deep and authoritative. "I'm Commander Mason, Strike Team Echo. We've been assigned to protect this outpost and secure the evilite." Ilara nodded, her gaze drifting to the soldiers disembarking from the ships, their weapons at the ready. "I appreciate the support, Commander. But you should know, evilite is still largely untested. Its effects on humans are unknown." Mason's expression remained stoic. "We've been briefed on the risks, Doctor. But the Earth government believes the benefits outweigh them. Our priority is to ensure that evilite doesn't fall into the wrong hands." Ilara sighed, her unease growing. She had feared this would happen, that her discovery would be seen as a weapon rather than a scientific breakthrough. "Commander, evilite is a gift, not a tool for war. We need to study it carefully, understand its full potential before we—" A sudden explosion cut her off, the ground shaking beneath their feet. Mason's hand instinctively went to his sidearm as he turned toward the source of the blast. "Get down," he barked, pushing Ilara to the ground as a volley of plasma bolts ripped through the air above them. The attack had come without warning. Dozens of alien ships, their sleek, angular designs unmistakable, descended from the sky, their weapons firing in all directions. Mason recognized them immediately, the Xerans, a warlike race known for their relentless aggression and advanced technology. "Xerans." Mason shouted, activating his comms. "All units, defensive positions. Protect the outpost and the evilite at all costs." The soldiers of Strike Team Echo sprang into action, their training and discipline evident as they took up defensive positions around the clearing. Plasma fire and explosives erupted from both sides as the two forces clashed in a fierce battle for control of the outpost. Ilara watched in horror as the battle unfolded around her. The Xerans were relentless, their assault overwhelming the human defenses. She knew that the outpost wouldn't hold for long, not against such a formidable enemy. Mason's voice crackled over the comms, issuing orders with precision and calm despite the chaos. Echo Squad, focus fire on their lead ship. We need to take out their command structure. Ilara's mind raced as she searched for a solution, something that could turn the tide of the battle. Then it hit her, the Evilite. It was a gamble, but if it worked, it could give the human soldiers the edge they needed. Commander, she called out, crawling toward Mason as plasma fire scorched the ground around them. We need to use the Evilite. Mason looked at her, a mixture of skepticism and desperation in his eyes. Are you out of your mind? We have no idea what that stuff will do to us. It's our only chance. Ilara insisted, her voice filled with urgency. If we don't do something now, we're all going to die. Mason hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Fine. Do it. Ilara scrambled to her feet and ran to the research lab, her heart pounding in her chest. Inside, she quickly retrieved a canister of pure Evilite, her hands trembling as she prepared the injection system. There was no time for caution, no time to consider the risks. She had to trust that the Evilite would do what she hoped. Returning to Mason, she handed him the injection device. This will enhance your physical abilities, make you stronger, faster, more resilient. But there's no telling how long it will last or what side effects it might have. Mason took the device, his expression grim. I've faced worse odds. Let's do this. He injected himself with the Evilite, a sharp gasp escaping his lips as the substance coursed through his veins. Ilara watched in awe as his body began to change before her eyes. His muscles swelled, his reflexes sharpened, and his eyes glowed with an unnatural intensity. Mason gritted his teeth, feeling the power surge through him. He could feel his senses heightening, his mind racing with newfound clarity. It was as if every cell in his body was alive, pulsing with energy. He turned to his men, who had also taken the Evilite injections, their faces filled with the same mixture of fear and exhilaration. Let's show these Zirans what we're made of. With a roar, Mason led the charge, his soldiers following close behind. The human forces, now enhanced by Evilite, fought with renewed vigor, their movements almost too fast to follow. They tore through the Ziran ranks, their weapons cutting through the alien forces with lethal precision. The tide of the battle shifted. The Zirans, caught off guard by the sudden surge in human strength, began to falter. Mason's men pushed them back, reclaiming lost ground and forcing the aliens into a retreat, but the Evilite's power came at a cost. As the battle raged on, Mason began to feel the strain on his body. His muscles burned, his vision blurred, and his thoughts became fragmented. He could sense the Evilite's influence beginning to wear off, the enhancements fading as quickly as they had come. Ilara, he gasped into his comms, his voice strained. We're losing it. We need a fallback plan. Ilara's voice crackled through the comms, filled with concern. Commander, you have to hold on. We're so close to victory. Mason shook his head, struggling to stay focused. I don't know how much longer we can hold out. Just as the situation seemed dire, a new threat emerged. A sleek, silver ship descended from the sky, its design unmistakably Virexian. The Virexians had been watching the battle from afar, waiting for the right moment to strike. Now, with both the human and Ziran forces weakened, they saw their opportunity. The Virexian ship unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, targeting both sides indiscriminately. The Zirans, already on the brink of defeat, were obliterated in seconds. Mason's forces, their evilite enhancements fading, struggled to regroup under the relentless assault. Elara. Mason shouted into his comms, his voice barely audible over the sounds of battle. "We need to take down that Virexian ship, or it's all over." Elara, back in the research lab, frantically searched for a solution. She knew that the remaining evilite wouldn't be enough to turn the tide this time. The Virexians were too powerful, too advanced. But then, she had an idea, a risky, desperate idea. "Commander," she said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "I'm going to overload the evilite reactor. It might create a blast strong enough to take out the Virexians, but it will destroy the outpost, and everything in it." Mason was silent for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. "Do it," he finally said, his voice resigned. "It's our only chance." Elara's hands trembled as she worked, her mind racing. She had dedicated her life to understanding the mysteries of the universe, to pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. But now, she was faced with the ultimate decision, whether to sacrifice everything she had worked for to protect the future of humanity. The reactor began to hum, the evilite inside it glowing brighter and brighter. Elara took one last look at the research lab, the place that had been her home for so many years. Then she turned and ran, knowing that she wouldn't have much time. Outside, Mason and his men continued to fight, their bodies aching from the effects of the fading evilite. The Virexian ship loomed overhead, its weapons primed to deliver the final blow. "Elara." Mason shouted, his voice filled with urgency. "We're out of time. I'm almost there." Elara called back, her voice strained as she sprinted toward the reactor controls. The energy readings were off the charts, the reactor on the verge of a catastrophic overload. But it wasn't ready yet. She needed just a few more seconds. The ground shook as another blast from the Virexian ship hit the outpost, sending debris flying in all directions. Mason and his men were thrown to the ground, the impact knocking the wind out of them. Mason struggled to his feet, his vision blurry, his limbs heavy. He knew that if Elara didn't activate the reactor soon, they were all doomed. "Elara." Mason shouted again, his voice barely audible over the sounds of battle. "Do it now." Elara's fingers flew over the controls, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the heat of the reactor behind her, the evilite's energy reaching a critical point. She took a deep breath, her hand hovering over the final switch. "Goodbye, Nova Terra," she whispered, then slammed her hand down on the switch. The reactor erupted in a blinding flash of light, the energy contained within it unleashed in a massive explosion. The shockwave tore through the outpost, obliterating everything in its path. The Virexian ship, caught in the blast, disintegrated in a shower of debris. Mason watched in awe as the explosion consumed the battlefield, the sheer power of the evilite's energy leaving nothing but scorched earth in its wake. The Virexians were gone, their threat eliminated. The battle was over, but the cost had been high. The outpost, the research lab, and everything within it had been destroyed. Elara Kane was gone, her sacrifice ensuring the survival of her people. Mason's heart ached with the loss, but he knew that her actions had saved them all. In the aftermath of the battle, the survivors regrouped, their bodies and minds exhausted. Mason, his armor battered and scorched, stood among them, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Nova Terra had been saved, but the price had been steep. As the dust settled, Mason couldn't help but wonder what the future would hold. The evilite had been destroyed, its power lost to the stars. But the memory of its potential remained, a reminder of what humanity could achieve, and the dangers that came with it. In the days that followed, the survivors worked to rebuild, their efforts fueled by the hope that Elara's sacrifice had not been in vain. The story of the battle for Nova Terra spread across the galaxy, a tale of bravery, sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of progress. And as the Earth government prepared to send a new team to Nova Terra, one question remained unanswered: what other secrets did the universe hold, and how far would humanity go to uncover them? The end of the battle marked the beginning of a new chapter in human history. The Evilite may have been lost, but the lessons learned from it would shape the future of humanity for generations to come. And as the survivors of Nova Terra looked to the stars, they knew that their journey was far from over. The edge of evolution had been reached, but the path ahead was still unknown, filled with both danger and possibility. And for those who had witnessed the power of Evilite firsthand, there was no turning back. The future of humanity was evolving, and nothing would ever be the same again. Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The galactic frontier stretched endlessly before Agent Nathan Drake as he sat in the cockpit of his sleek, silver spacecraft, the Interceptor. The ship's control panel hummed softly, a steady rhythm that matched the beating of his heart. Nathan's eyes, sharp and focused, scanned the vast expanse of space, the stars twinkling like distant embers in the dark void. He was a man of discipline, with a chiseled jawline and short, cropped hair that was starting to gray at the temples, an early mark of the countless battles he'd fought. His uniform, pristine and dark blue, bore the insignia of the Interstellar Enforcement Agency on his shoulder, a symbol of the law he upheld in this lawless stretch of the galaxy. Nathan was on the hunt. For weeks, he had been tracking an elusive alien smuggling gang, known for their daring heists and their uncanny ability to evade capture. This was no ordinary crew. They wielded space-time technology that allowed them to jump between dimensions and timelines, slipping through the fingers of justice as if they were never there. The leader of the gang, Crixer, was a name that sent shivers down the spines of law enforcement across the galaxy, a cunning and ruthless mastermind who had left a trail of destruction in his wake. Today, Nathan was closer than he had ever been. The Interstellar Enforcement Agency had picked up chatter about a heist on a mining colony situated on the edge of the anomalous zone, a region where time and space were twisted into unpredictable anomalies. Nathan had spent years studying these anomalies, learning their patterns, their rhythms. He knew that if he played his cards right, today could be the day he finally brought Crixer to justice. As the Interceptor glided through the dark, Nathan's mind raced with the details of the plan he had meticulously crafted. He had set a trap, a series of temporal pitfalls designed to catch Crixer off guard. But he knew that Crixer was no fool. The alien had a sixth sense for danger, an almost supernatural ability to foresee the moves of his enemies. Nathan would have to be quicker, smarter, more relentless than ever before. The control panel beeped, pulling Nathan from his thoughts. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as a red dot appeared on the holodisplay. The mining colony was in sight, a large, metallic structure anchored to the surface of a barren asteroid. The colony's lights flickered in the darkness, casting long shadows across the rocky terrain. Nathan's pulse quickened. The chase was about to begin. He powered down the ship's main engines, allowing it to drift silently toward the colony. The Interceptor was equipped with advanced cloaking technology, making it nearly invisible to radar and thermal sensors. Nathan knew Crixer's crew would be on high alert, but he was determined to catch them off guard. As he approached the colony, Nathan activated the ship's scanners. The display lit up with a complex web of energy signatures, indicating the presence of multiple ships docked at the colony. He recognized the sleek, angular design of the smuggler ships, black, needle-like vessels optimized for speed and stealth. There was no doubt now, Crixer was here. Nathan activated his comms, opening a secure channel to his command center back on Earth. "Command, this is Agent Drake. I've located the target at the mining colony in Sector 7G. I'm moving in to engage. Copy that, Agent Drake, a voice crackled through the comms. It was the calm, steady tone of Commander Phillips, Nathan's superior and longtime mentor. Proceed with caution. Crixer is highly dangerous, and we don't want to lose you out there. Nathan's grip tightened on the controls. Understood, Commander. I'll bring him in. He cut the comms and took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. The element of surprise was his greatest weapon, and he intended to use it to full effect. With a flick of his wrist, Nathan brought the ship out of cloak and powered up the main thrusters. The interceptor surged forward, closing the distance between him and the colony in a matter of seconds. He activated the ship's weapon systems, arming the plasma cannons and preparing for combat. As the colony loomed larger in the viewport, Nathan caught sight of movement below. A group of figures was hurriedly loading crates into one of the smuggler ships. He zoomed in, his heart skipping a beat as he recognized the tall, imposing figure of Crixer, his dark, reptilian skin gleaming under the harsh lights of the colony. Crixer's yellow eyes darted around, his sharp, predatory gaze scanning the area as if sensing the impending danger. Nathan wasted no time. He locked onto the smuggler ship and fired a volley of plasma bolts. The bright blue energy streaked through the darkness, striking the ship's hull with explosive force. The ship shuddered under the impact, and a plume of smoke billowed from its engines. The smugglers scattered, drawing their weapons as they searched for the source of the attack. Crixer's voice boomed across the comms, barking orders in an alien tongue. Nathan knew he had only seconds before they regrouped. He activated the ship's automated turret systems, targeting the smugglers on the ground. The turret swiveled into position and unleashed a barrage of laser fire, forcing the smugglers to take cover behind the crates. Nathan maneuvered the interceptor into a strafing run, circling the colony and firing at the smuggler ships that were trying to take off. Crixer's ship, however, remained grounded, its damaged engines sputtering as the alien leader worked frantically to repair them. Nathan could see the fury in Crixer's eyes, a burning hatred that only fueled his own determination. Nathan brought the ship around for another pass, targeting Crixer's vessel. But before he could fire, a sudden jolt rocked the interceptor, throwing Nathan against his seat. Alarms blared as the ship's systems struggled to compensate. Nathan's hands flew over the controls, trying to stabilize the craft. He glanced at the sensors and cursed under his breath. Crixer had activated a temporal distortion field, a device that warped the space-time continuum around the colony. The interceptor was caught in the field, its systems going haywire as the fabric of reality itself twisted and bent. Nathan fought to regain control, his mind racing as he tried to calculate a way out of the trap. The temporal field was destabilizing, creating a series of time loops and paradoxes that threatened to tear the ship apart. Just when it seemed the interceptor would be ripped to shreds, Nathan had an idea. He quickly accessed the ship's temporal navigation system, a cutting-edge piece of technology that allowed him to chart a course through the anomalies. He plotted a course through the distortion, threading the needle through the shifting currents of time. The interceptor shuddered violently, but Nathan held firm, his hands steady on the controls. With a final surge of power, the ship broke free of the field, emerging on the other side of the anomaly. Nathan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The interceptor had taken a beating, but it was still flying. He quickly assessed the damage and was relieved to see that the core systems were intact. He couldn't afford any more surprises like that. Crixer, however, wasn't finished. Nathan watched as the alien leader abandoned his ship, fleeing into the mining colony with a small group of his most loyal followers. They disappeared into the dark corridors of the facility, leaving the remaining smugglers to fend for themselves. Nathan set the interceptor to hover mode and activated the ship's landing gear. He grabbed his pulse rifle and holstered his sidearm, his mind focused on the task ahead. This was his chance to end it, to finally bring Crixer to justice. He stepped out of the ship and onto the surface of the asteroid, the gravity low but manageable. The air was thin, and Nathan's breathing apparatus kicked in, feeding him a steady supply of oxygen. He moved quickly toward the entrance to the colony, his rifle at the ready. The mining colony was a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers, each one dimly lit by flickering overhead lights. The walls were made of cold, unforgiving metal, and the air was thick with the scent of ore and machinery. Nathan's footsteps echoed off the walls as he made his way deeper into the facility. He activated his helmet's infrared scanner, the visor lighting up with a spectrum of colors as it detected heat signatures. He could see Crixer and his men moving ahead, their outlines glowing a bright red against the blue background of the cold metal walls. Nathan followed the trail, keeping his movements swift and silent. He knew Crixer was leading him into a trap, but he also knew that this was his best shot at catching the alien. Crixer was desperate, and desperate men made mistakes. As he rounded a corner, Nathan heard the sound of machinery clanking in the distance. He pressed himself against the wall and peeked around the corner. Ahead, the corridor opened into a large chamber filled with mining equipment and conveyor belts. The machines were still running, processing the ore that the miners had extracted before the smugglers arrived. Nathan scanned the room, his visor picking up multiple heat signatures. Crixer and his men were setting up a defensive position near the far end of the chamber, using the machinery as cover. Nathan counted 6 of them, including Crixer. He considered his options. Charging in head first would be suicide. Crixer's men were armed and well-trained, and they had the advantage of cover. Nathan needed to draw them out, to force them into the open where he could pick them off one by one. He spotted a control panel on the wall nearby and quickly moved toward it. The panel controlled the machinery in the chamber, and Nathan began to input a series of commands. The machines roared to life, the conveyor belt speeding up as the mining equipment started to operate at full capacity. The sudden noise and movement startled Crixer's men. They looked around in confusion, trying to figure out what was happening. Nathan took advantage of the distraction, moving quickly and silently across the chamber, using the machinery as cover. He found a vantage point on a catwalk above the chamber, giving him a clear view of Crixer and his men below. He set his rifle to single-shot mode and took aim, lining up his first target. The shot was clean, a bright blue bolt of energy that struck one of Crixer's men in the chest. The alien dropped to the ground, his weapon clattering beside him. The others reacted instantly, returning fire in the direction of the shot, but Nathan was already on the move, using the chaos to reposition himself. He fired again, dropping another of Crixer's men before they could get a fix on his location. Crixer roared in anger, his voice echoing through the chamber. He fired a burst of plasma bolts in Nathan's direction, but the shots went wide, striking the machinery instead. Nathan took a deep breath, steadying his aim. He lined up his next shot, but before he could fire, the catwalk beneath him shuddered. The temporal distortion was affecting the structure, causing the metal to bend and warp. Nathan felt the catwalk give way, and he jumped, just barely grabbing onto a ledge as the metal crumbled beneath him. He hung there for a moment, his pulse pounding in his ears, before pulling himself up. He had lost his vantage point, but he wasn't out of the fight yet. He scrambled to his feet and pressed himself against the wall, taking a moment to assess the situation. Crixer and his remaining men were moving toward the exit on the far side of the chamber, trying to escape. Nathan wasn't about to let that happen. He sprinted after them, firing as he ran. The pulse rifle hummed in his hands, each shot bright and deadly. He hit another of Crixer's men, the alien stumbling as the energy bolt tore through him. Crixer spun around, firing a burst of plasma bolts that forced Nathan to dive for cover. The shot struck the wall behind him, sending sparks flying. Nathan rolled to his feet and returned fire, but Crixer had already moved out of sight. Nathan cursed under his breath. Crixer was a slippery one, always a step ahead. But Nathan wasn't about to give up. He pushed forward, moving through the chamber and into the corridor beyond. The corridor was dark and narrow, the walls closing in around him. Nathan could hear the sound of Crixer's footsteps echoing ahead, the alien moving quickly, trying to put as much distance between them as possible. Nathan's heart raced as he followed, his mind focused on the chase. He had to catch Crixer before he could escape, before he could slip away into the shadows of the galaxy once more. The corridor opened into another chamber, this one smaller and more cramped. The walls were lined with crates and barrels, the air thick with the smell of fuel and oil. Nathan could see Crixer ahead, the alien darting between the crates as he tried to find a way out. Nathan didn't hesitate. He raised his rifle and fired, the shot narrowly missing Crixer as the alien ducked behind a stack of crates. Nathan moved in closer, his finger on the trigger, ready to take the shot the moment Crixer showed himself, but Crixer was quicker. He emerged from behind the crates, a wicked grin on his face as he fired a burst of plasma bolts at Nathan. The shot struck the wall beside him, forcing Nathan to dive for cover. Crixer moved toward the exit, his footsteps echoing through the chamber. Nathan scrambled to his feet and followed, his pulse pounding in his ears. He couldn't let Crixer escape, not now, not after coming so far. The exit led into a narrow tunnel, the walls closing in around Nathan as he ran. The tunnel twisted and turned, the darkness pressing in on all sides. Nathan could hear Crixer ahead, the alien's footsteps quick and light, like a predator on the hunt. Nathan pushed himself harder, his legs burning as he sprinted through the tunnel. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins, his mind focused on one thing, catching Crixer. The tunnel opened into a cavern, the ceiling high above and the walls lined with jagged rocks. Nathan could see Crixer ahead, the alien climbing a steep incline that led to the surface. The light from the stars above filtered down, casting long shadows across the cavern. Nathan didn't slow down. He sprinted across the cavern, his boots kicking up dust as he ran. Crixer was almost at the top of the incline, his dark figure silhouetted against the light. Nathan raised his rifle, his finger on the trigger. But before he could take the shot, a bright flash of light filled the cavern. The temporal distortion was destabilizing, the fabric of space-time tearing apart. Nathan felt a wave of energy wash over him, the force of it knocking him to the ground. He rolled onto his back, his head spinning as the cavern around him twisted and warped. Crixer was at the top of the incline, a look of triumph on his face as he prepared to make his escape. Nathan knew he had only seconds to act, only seconds to stop Crixer before he disappeared into the folds of time. He reached for his belt, his fingers closing around a small, cylindrical device. It was a temporal anchor, a device designed to stabilize spacetime and prevent anomalies. Nathan had only one, and he had been saving it for just this moment. He activated the device and hurled it toward Crixer. The anchor flew through the air, a bright blue light trailing behind it. Crixer saw it coming, his eyes widening in surprise as the device struck the ground beside him. The anchor activated, a wave of energy radiating out from it. The fabric of spacetime began to stabilize, the distortion field collapsing in on itself. Crixer roared in anger, his plans unraveling before his eyes. Nathan struggled to his feet, his pulse rifle heavy in his hands. He aimed at Crixer, the alien's form flickering as the temporal anomaly collapsed around him. Crixer made one last desperate attempt to escape, lunging toward the edge of the cavern. But Nathan was faster. He fired, the shot hitting Crixer square in the chest. The alien stumbled, his hand reaching out as if to grasp at the air. But there was nothing to hold on to, nothing to save him. Crixer fell, his body tumbling down the incline, disappearing into the darkness below. Nathan stood there, his pulse rifle still aimed at the spot where Crixer had fallen. The cavern was silent, the only sound the faint hum of the temporal anchor as it continued to stabilize the area. Nathan took a deep breath, lowering his rifle. It was over. Crixer was gone, and the threat had been neutralized, but the victory was bittersweet. Nathan knew that Crixer's death wouldn't be the end of it. The shadowy organization behind the smuggling ring was still out there, still plotting, still manipulating the fabric of reality for their own ends. Nathan turned and began the long climb out of the cavern, his mind already racing with thoughts of what was to come. He would have to report back to the Interstellar Enforcement Agency, to debrief and plan the next steps, but for now, he had done his duty. He had stopped Crixer, and he had prevented the catastrophe that could have torn the galaxy apart. As he emerged into the light of the stars above, Nathan felt a sense of calm wash over him. He had faced the darkness and come out on the other side. And as long as there were threats to the galaxy, he would be there to stop them, because that was who he was, an agent of the law, a protector of the galaxy. And no matter how far the shadows reached, he would always be there to bring them to light. Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. On the remote planet of Terra Nova, a distant colony on the edge of human expansion, the air hung heavy with the scent of sand and metal. The planet, a desolate and harsh environment, had always seemed indifferent to the human presence. Terra Nova was a place of both opportunity and danger, a land where humanity had eked out a living, mining the rich resources buried beneath the surface. But it was also a place full of mysteries, relics of a time long before humans ever set foot there. Ethan Carter, a young and determined engineer, had always been fascinated by these ancient remnants. The wastelands, a vast, barren desert that stretched beyond the horizon, were dotted with the remains of structures from a forgotten civilization. These ruins held secrets that whispered to those who dared to listen, and Ethan had always been one of those who couldn't resist the call. It was in these very ruins that Ethan found himself one fateful day, conducting routine maintenance on a series of ancient power conduits that had been discovered buried deep beneath the sands. The sun beat down mercilessly as Ethan wiped the sweat from his brow, his eyes narrowing against the glare. The ruins were half buried in the dunes, only the tops of their spires visible above the shifting sands. The facility he worked for, a small research outpost on the edge of the wastelands, had been studying these structures for years, but so far, their secrets had remained stubbornly hidden. But today, something felt different. Ethan's tools clinked as he worked, his hands moving with practiced ease over the ancient machinery. He had spent countless hours studying the alien technology, learning its nuances and quirks. Despite the centuries that had passed since their construction, the machine still seemed alive, humming with a faint, almost imperceptible energy. It was this energy that had always intrigued Ethan the most. It was as if the ruins themselves were waiting for something, or someone. As he finished his work and prepared to return to the outpost, Ethan's gaze was drawn to a peculiar structure partially uncovered by the shifting sands. It was massive, much larger than any of the other ruins he had seen, and its surface was smooth, almost organic, unlike the harsh, angular lines of the other buildings. Curiosity piqued, Ethan approached the structure, brushing away the sand that clung to its surface. As he did, he felt a strange sensation, like a static charge prickling along his skin. The structure, as it turned out, was not a building at all, but a massive, dormant robot. Its form was humanoid, towering over Ethan even as it lay half buried in the sand. The robot was made of an unknown alloy, its surface unmarred by the passage of time. As Ethan ran his hand along its smooth exterior, he felt a connection, a sense that this machine was not merely a relic, but something more, a sleeping giant waiting to be awakened. Ethan quickly called in his discovery to the outpost, and within hours, a team of scientists and engineers had arrived to examine the robot. The initial excitement was palpable, but it soon gave way to frustration as the team struggled to understand the machine. The robot was unlike anything they had ever encountered. Its systems were beyond their comprehension, and no one could figure out how to activate it. Days turned into weeks as the team worked tirelessly to unlock the robot's secrets. But despite their best efforts, the giant remained lifeless, an enigma wrapped in an impenetrable shell. The colony's leaders grew impatient, their attention turning to more immediate concerns. Word had reached Terra Nova that an alien fleet had been detected on the outer edges of the star system, an invasion force from the Zorathian Empire, a warlike species known for their brutality. Panic spread through the colony as the news broke. Terra Nova was a small, isolated outpost, with only a modest defense force. The Zorathians were vastly more powerful, their technology far more advanced. The colony's defenses, which had never been tested in battle, were woefully inadequate to face such a threat. The prospect of evacuation was discussed, but the logistics were nightmarish, and many feared they would not escape in time. In the midst of this growing crisis, Ethan found himself drawn back to the robot. He couldn't shake the feeling that the key to their survival lay within the giant's dormant form. Late one night, unable to sleep, he returned to the wastelands alone, driven by a sense of urgency he couldn't explain. The wind howled around him as he approached the robot, the sand swirling in eddies at his feet. The air was thick with static, and Ethan's skin tingled as he reached out to touch the robot's surface. As his hand made contact, a surge of energy coursed through him, stronger than anything he had ever felt before. It was as if the robot was alive, reaching out to him, trying to communicate. Ethan stumbled back, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the connection now, a bond between him and the machine that defied explanation. It wasn't just a piece of technology, it was something more, something alive. And it was trying to wake up. Over the next few days, Ethan devoted himself to understanding this connection. He spent every waking moment in the wastelands, working on the robot, trying to decipher its systems. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing day, and slowly, Ethan began to learn how to control the machine. It was a painstaking process, requiring immense concentration and mental fortitude. The robot's systems were far more advanced than anything Ethan had ever encountered, and each attempt to activate it left him drained, both physically and mentally. Ethan's obsession with the robot did not go unnoticed. His mentor, Dr. Olivia Grant, a seasoned expert in ancient technologies, grew concerned for his well-being. She had always been supportive of Ethan's work, but she could see the toll it was taking on him. One evening, she confronted him in the research lab, her voice filled with worry. "Ethan, you can't keep pushing yourself like this," Olivia said, her brow furrowed with concern. "You're going to burn out. Whatever connection you have with that machine, it's dangerous. You need to be careful." "I know, Olivia," Ethan replied, his voice tinged with exhaustion. "But I can't stop now. I feel like I'm so close to unlocking its full potential. This robot, it's the key to everything. If we can control it, we can protect the colony from the Zorathians. We might be our only hope." Olivia sighed, her eyes softening. She could see the determination in Ethan's eyes, the fire that drove him forward. "Just promise me you'll be careful," she said finally. We need you, Ethan. The colony needs you. I will, Ethan promised, though he wasn't entirely sure he could keep that promise. The connection between him and the robot was growing stronger every day, but so was the strain on his mind and body. The robot was awakening, and with it came a power unlike anything Ethan had ever imagined. As the days passed, the Zorathian fleet drew closer, their intentions unmistakable. The colony's defenses were hastily bolstered, but everyone knew it wouldn't be enough. The Zorathians were ruthless, and they would stop at nothing to conquer Terra Nova. Finally, the day came when the Zorathian fleet arrived in orbit around Terra Nova. The sky above the colony darkened as their massive warships descended, blotting out the sun. The ground trembled as the first waves of Zorathian troops began their assault, overwhelming the colony's defenses with terrifying speed. In the chaos that followed, Ethan knew that the time had come. He made his way to the wastelands, where the giant robot lay waiting. As he approached, he could feel the connection between them flare to life, stronger than ever before. The robot was awake, and it was ready. With a deep breath, Ethan reached out, his hand trembling as it made contact with the robot's surface. The energy surged through him, more powerful than anything he had ever experienced. It was as if the robot's consciousness was merging with his own, their minds becoming one. For a moment, Ethan was overwhelmed by the sheer force of the connection. The robot's systems were a dizzying array of inputs and outputs, a vast network of circuits and algorithms that stretched far beyond his comprehension. But slowly, with immense effort, he began to impose his will on the machine, guiding it, directing it. The robot's eyes flickered to life, glowing with a brilliant blue light. Its massive limbs, dormant for centuries, began to move, shaking off the sand that had covered them. Ethan could feel the power coursing through the robot's body, a surge of energy that filled him with both awe and fear. The Zorathian troops, already wreaking havoc on the colony, turned their attention to the wastelands as the ground began to tremble beneath their feet. They saw the giant rising from the sands, its form towering over the battlefield, and for the first time, they hesitated. With a deafening roar, the robot fully awakened, its systems humming with life. Ethan, now fully connected to the machine, could see the battlefield through its eyes, could feel its immense power at his fingertips. The robot was more than just a weapon, it was a living being, an extension of his own will. The Zorathians launched their attack, their weapons blazing as they attempted to bring down the giant. But the robot was too powerful, too fast. Ethan guided it with precision, its massive arms swatting away enemy ships as if they were flies. The robot's weaponry, far more advanced than anything the colony possessed, tore through the Zorathian forces, decimating their ranks. The battle raged on, the ground shaking with each step the robot took. Ethan's mind was fully immersed in the machine, the bond between them now unbreakable. He could feel the robot's thoughts, its instincts guiding his actions. Together, they were unstoppable, but the strain of controlling such a powerful machine was immense. Ethan could feel his strength waning, his body and mind pushed to their limits. The connection was so intense that it felt as if the robot was draining his very life force, drawing on his energy to fuel its immense power. As the Zorathians began to fall back, their forces decimated by the giant's relentless assault, Ethan knew he had to finish the fight. With a final surge of energy, he directed the robot to the heart of the Zorathian fleet, its massive fists tearing through the enemy ships with devastating force. The Zorathians, realizing they were no match for the giant, began to retreat, their warships fleeing into the depths of space. The battle was over. Terra Nova was saved. But as the last of the Zorathian ships disappeared from view, Ethan felt the connection between him and the robot begin to fade. The giant, its purpose fulfilled, slowly powered down, its eyes dimming as it returned to its dormant state. Ethan collapsed to the ground, his body trembling with exhaustion. He had given everything he had to control the robot, and now he felt empty, drained. The victory was bittersweet, the colony was safe, but the cost had been high. As the dust settled and the survivors of the battle began to emerge, Ethan stood before the giant, its form now silent and still. The robot, once a relic of a forgotten past, had become a symbol of hope and strength for the colony. But Ethan knew that the bond he had shared with the machine was not something to be taken lightly. The power it held was immense, but so was the responsibility that came with it. In the days that followed, the colony began to rebuild, the damage from the Zorathian attack slowly being repaired. Ethan was hailed as a hero, the man who had awakened the giant and saved Terra Nova. But he couldn't shake the feeling that the robot's true purpose had yet to be fully revealed. The connection they had shared, the power he had wielded, it was only the beginning. As he stood before the giant one last time, Ethan couldn't help but wonder what other secrets the machine held, what other challenges lay ahead. The robot, now a guardian of Terra Nova, seemed to watch over the colony, its presence a reminder of the power and mystery that still lay hidden within the wastelands. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the desert. Ethan placed his hand on the robot's cold, metallic surface, feeling the faintest trace of energy still lingering within. He knew that one day, the giant would awaken again, and when that time came, he would be ready. For now, though, the giant would rest, and so would Ethan. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. The galaxy was vast, and there were many more threats out there, waiting in the darkness. But with the giant by his side, Ethan knew that he would face whatever came next with courage and determination. The giant had awakened, and so had Ethan. Together, they had saved Terra Nova, but their journey was only just beginning.